No. Hello, everybody. We're supposedly live, but I'm going to wait like a few seconds just to make sure because I don't trust YouTube.
Why wouldn't
Hello,
you trust
everybody.
YouTube?
Hey, everybody. Welcome to WordCast. This here is number 23. So, yeah, and I'm also glad I waited a few seconds there, by the way, because it did. The broadcast thing here is actually incorrect. But anyway, welcome to WordCast number 23. This is our Computex coverage here. I'm sure we'll have a little bit more Computex coverage for you next week because it's still happening. But this is the biggest stuff that's been happening lately. And we have a lot of news to get through. But anyway, I'm Ethan. This is Daniel. Daniel, introduce yourself.
I'm Daniel.
Thank you, everybody, for watching, though. And that concludes WordCast. There's so much news that we decided just to not do it because we can't talk about it. It's too much.
I agree with that.
Yep. All right.
Let's talk Intel first, just to get that out of the way.
Intel. Things happened with Intel. Big things, mostly good things.
I was gonna switch the orders of these around, but I didn't have time. So we'll just start at the bottom of the Intel list or the processor list and go up.
Oh, so we're gonna start with the good stuff and go to the shitty stuff?
Yeah.
That's really anticlimactic.
What's up with that? Then there's the extra stuff about Intel after.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll start with this beautiful new.
People care about the i9.
series.
Nobody gives a shit about an i5 Extreme.
But we're gonna talk about it either way, and sometimes people are late.
I know.
I hate you.
Yeah.
All right. So the i9s came out. Intel i9s are a thing now. So it's been rumored for like a decade that Intel would eventually do this, and yes, they finally did. Likely in response to Ryzen. Basically, they just took some of their Xeon lineup and bumped up the clock speeds and labeled i9 on it because that is how Intel does their Extreme Edition series CPUs. Anyway, do you want to jump into it or shall I?
I'll do a little bit. So first off, they go up to $2,000, and that is for the i9 7980XE, which is their top tier CPU now for the consumer line.
So is it the 7980X Extreme? It's like
no.
Extreme spelled with an X and then Extreme spelled with an E.
I guess.
I don't know. Why would they add?
It's XETREME.
Why would they? I don't understand why they added an E. It was fine with just an X.
To make it fancier.
Oh, it's so dumb. I don't like it. Oh,
neither do I. Nobody does.
Should have called it the i11.
Yeah. So this is an 18-core, 36-thread CPU. And it costs a lot of money. That's all we really for sure know about it, other than the generic stuff that's applicable to all i9s, which we'll talk about in a second. They haven't confirmed clock speeds, although there have been multiple reports that it's likely going to be across the board for the i9's 3.3 base and 4.3 boost. But again, that's not confirmed, so we'll see.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. Definitely Intel likes to, I think, leave clock speeds low for efficiency purposes, especially for workstation-related stuff, and then just let the overclocking be drastic. And, of course, it does make for a really good buzz, really good media buzz when you say, oh, we've been able to, bump up by 1.5 gigahertz on this Intel CPU, even though Intel's like, well, yeah, but 100% of them will run at a gigahertz higher than we are, having them.
Yeah.
But,
yep.
I'm okay with it, though. I don't mind. Overclocking is entertaining, and it does help reduce power consumption. Again, like, you're a big business, you're doing 3D rendering or something like that, and you have to buy 4,000 systems. This ends up being a big deal where everything's running at most of the time a gigahertz lower, so it makes sense.
Yeah. And then they have
You didn't even say the core count.
I did too.
You said it was $2,000.
Then I said it was 18 cores and 36 threads.
I know you did. I just wanted you to keep talking about it because we don't have enough stuff to talk about tonight.
Yeah, not at all. Not even close. It's not like the Intel stuff takes up over a page on this doc.
It's like a page and a half, man. It's not. Yeah. It's more than a page and a half. It's not that bad.
That's more than some of our docs have been.
Some of our docs are like 4 bullet points.
Yeah. So then the next processor they have is the i9 7960X. So you lose the E and you drop 20 overall, and that's for a 16-core, 32-thread for $1,700.
Which is pretty cool. It's pretty cool. I mean, that is actually a decent price when you consider that you get 6 more cores than last time around for the same price. Thanks, Intel. Sorry, less. It was $1,750 MSRP for the 10-core. But we all knew they could do this. They just Intel didn't give a shit. They were just like, well, whatever. We'll charge $1,700 for it because who gives a fuck? Now they're charging $1,700 for something that's actually maybe a little bit logical. Although if Threadripper comes in at $1,000, it's going to be some tough competition. But we'll get to that later.
Yeah, it will be. And then from here we have the 7940X, which is a 14-core, 28-thread for $1,399.
Cool.
Now, for all three of these processors, the reason that that's all we're really saying is price and core count is because that's all Intel has officially confirmed. Whereas
those ones in specific.
Yes, yeah. Whereas with the i9 7900X, we have confirmations of a 12-core, 24-thread with a 3.3 gigahertz base, 4.3 gigahertz boost, 4.5 gigahertz boost 3.0, which I'll talk about more in just a second. It has 13.75 megabytes of L3 cache, and it costs $1,200.
Yes. So interesting there. There are a couple of these CPUs. The 10 core, I believe the 10 core. Do you even have the 10 core in here? I don't think you put the 10 core in here.
Apparently not, since I only listed every single one that was on this.
Yeah, there was a 10 core. I don't even remember the model number. I think it was. No, I think the 12 core is a 7920X. I believe.
Then my source article was wrong. That's nice.
That could be. No worries, no worries. We're fixing it on the fly, people. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was. I'm pretty sure the 7900X was the 10 core, which has the same specs. Sorry, everybody. So anyway, while he's double checking that.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Okay, so the 7920X is the 12 cores, what he meant to say. Then there's also a 7900X, which is the same thing, but is 10 cores, 20 threads. And interestingly enough, I believe everything below the 10 core is running less PCI Express lanes, but we'll get to that also in a moment. Okay, so I wanted to actually mention something here. So interesting, basically the 10 core, the 12 core, and the 14 core, you're paying $100 per core, which really isn't too bad. Then the prices start to go up when you go to the 16 and 18 cores, and they start to go down when you go down below the 10 cores, which are not i9s. So anyway, another good way to think of the i9 lineup, though something that helped me is basically you take the third digit in the 1,000 mark after the i9, and you just add 10 to that, and that's how many cores it has. So like the 7980X, that 8 there, you just add 10, 18 cores. 7960X, there's that 6, and you just add 10. So anyway, just wanted to point that out to people that may end up being confused or something about it.
Why would anyone be confused by this product lineup?
Well, this is not. I mean, it's better than 1998X.
Slightly.
Barely. Makes a little more sense. So anyway, here, yeah, we can jump into the Skylake X, the i7s on the Extreme series.
Yeah, so there's two of the Skylake X i7s. There is a 6-core, 12-thread i7 7800X and an 8-core, 16-thread i7 7820X. So the 7800X has 3.5 gigahertz base and 4 gigahertz boost, along with 8.25 megabytes of L3 cache, and it supports natively. It supports quad-channel DDR4 2400, and that costs $389. Yeah. And then there is the 7820X, which is 8-core, 16 threads, 3.6 gigahertz base, 4.3 gigahertz boost, and then 4.5 gigahertz boost 3.0. with 11 megabytes of L3 cache and support for DDR4 2666 for $600. Now, one thing real quick to mention, so with the Boost 3.0, it exists on the 7820X, going all the way up through the top tier i9. And what this is it effectively just when you're using an application that would use pretty much only like one core, it runs it only on the one core, and it allows it to boost up significantly higher. It moves whatever you're doing onto that one core, whatever one core would perform best. Because the thing is, when you're making these very high core count CPUs, some cores are going to run better than others. And so
sorry for that interruption. I'm back though.
Yeah, you should be.
Continue.
So with that, what they do is they essentially have the processor determine which core would run best, and they boost that one up super high. So that's where you get the 4.5 gigahertz boost across the entire lineup of any of the Turbo Boost 3.0 cores. So yeah.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm quite excited for this. I actually think the pricing is fairly good when it comes to the i7s on the Skylake X stuff. I'm a little bit questionable on the i9s, but you know.
Yeah. And then one thing, so across both of the i7s that are Skylake X based, they support 28 PCIe lanes, and they both run on 140 watts. Whereas with the i9s, they support 44 PCIe lanes, and the wattage is not confirmed because some of them will be higher than others.
Yeah, I'm assuming it's going to be like the 200-ish range. I mean, with that many cores.
I heard it might top out at 185, but again, not confirmed by Intel, so I wouldn't count on it.
We'll see.
Yeah.
And I mean, of course, that's without overclocking. It's going to go a lot higher with overclocking. So yeah, I mean, the PCI Express lane thing is interesting because the 8-core used to have the 44 lanes. And then there was a 6-core with 44 lanes. And I find it funny because if the 8 cores, I feel like they're just disabling lanes to give you an incentive to buy the more expensive stuff. I don't know for sure. I don't know the architectures completely. But what I do know is if there was an 8-core that existed for, if there was an 8-core that existed that had 44 lanes and they're all based on Xeons, I would think this time around would be kind of the same scenario. So I'm guessing I have a feeling almost like they're just disabling lanes to give an incentive, which makes me mad, but that wouldn't surprise me with the way Intel manages themselves.
Yeah, I really wouldn't be surprised with the fact that the PCIe lanes are so specific to different product lines. So like you have the i9s have one set amount of PCIe lanes. You have the i7 Skylakes with one set amount. And then you have both of the Kaby Lakes with one set lower amount.
Right.
So it seems to me very much like they're just intentionally setting them evenly across.
I think so. Lineups. Yeah. So well, I guess that's a good transition right there, though, into the Kaby Lake X stuff. You didn't talk about that yet, did you?
No, I did not.
So Kaby Lake X. Go
ahead.
All right, cool. So there is an i5 on the X299 chipset. Very weird. I'll get to that one in just a moment. There's another i7. It's the 7740X. It is a quad-core, 8-thread CPU, 4.3 gigahertz base, 4.5 gigahertz boost for $339 with 8 megabytes of L3 cache. This is weird. And then there's also an i5 7640X, which is a 4-core, 4-thread, 4.0 gigahertz, 4.2 gigahertz boost, $242 CPU with 6 megabytes of L3 cache. So yes, there's an i5 and an i7 on the X299 chipset, which is really weird to me because we already have i5s and i7s on the mainstream stuff, and they are this is literally the same thing. And in fact, as far as I know, on the X299 chipset, you can't use integrated graphics, and I don't even know if it would be enabled. Which means if integrated graphics is enabled, you can't use like QuickSync and stuff, even if it exists on these, which if they're just direct copies of the same chip, then it does exist on them. So you're actually losing a feature by going to X299. It makes no sense.
My other question, does Kaby Lake, like regular Kaby Lake, support quad channel RAM?
No.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, no, and this doesn't either.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're looking at dual channel RAM, meaning I wonder how that's going to work. Are we going to have X299 boards with 8 DIMM slots and only 4 can be used? That's the assumption. Like half of them will be one side. That's kind of awkward.
I imagine what's going to happen, because that's the thing, is X299 is such a mess because of all of this. Really what it seems like is going on is I'm guessing we're not going to see very many boards that are optimized for like Kaby Lake X and have very limited support. I feel like every board is probably just going to go balls to the walls.
I have a feeling that they're going to function with it, but a lot of shit will be disabled. You'll have less PCI.
It'll just be disabled depending on you'll operate based on the CPU.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you'll have disabled M.2 slots. You'll have disabled U.2 slots. You'll have disabled DIMM slots. You're getting a board. You're paying for a board that actually is going to have less available or less usable features on it, simply because you're going with a quad core, and you're paying more for that. Actually paying the same for the quad core, but more for that board, and you're getting less features from the quad core versus the mainstream quad core. This is basically Intel saying, "Hey, fuck us because we don't know what we're doing."
What I see it as, or what I've always seen it as with this, since I saw this product lineup, was that the i5 and the i7 Kaby Lake exist specifically in a place for people that are wanting to do very, very high-end builds and can afford most of the build, but maybe couldn't drop the $2,000 or $1,700 on a processor.
So they want to start off and then move up.
Yeah. So let's say you're, getting into gaming and streaming or gaming and YouTube, and you want to build a computer. Well, let's say you have the money, but you just want to make sure that it's something you want to continue with. So you drop the money on you just drop the $240 on the i5 before you decide you want to go all out and get something like a 10 or above core CPU.
Right. And I guess that makes sense. I can understand that because I like to set myself up for upgrade paths. Mm-hmm. But I also think that personally, at least if I were helping somebody build a system, I would never recommend that sort of thing.
Oh, I agree.
My thing would be save up enough money to get the CPU, or at least a good CPU, like minimum the 6-core, and a really good motherboard, good power supply, good case, the things that you can keep for 4 years without having to worry about. Then everything else comes later. That's what I'm doing with my either my X299 or my Threadripper system that's coming up here towards the end of the year. I'm building it on a good base platform. I'm actually going to be starting with like a 1050 Ti for my graphics card because I'm like, I just want to get a good base platform and then I'll dump more money into it as time goes along. Storage and all the other stuff like that. Also, Joe made a few comments. He can't wait for the i9 9999X because it'll run at 8.9 gigahertz and won't be unlocked for overclocking because Intel is a troll. I think you're the one being the troll there, Joe. No, but yeah, I actually... Yeah, Intel is a troll. I won't deny that. And then 7700K is better than the 6950X for gaming anyways, right, because IPC and higher clocks. Well, we're not talking about the 6950X. I don't know if you joined maybe a little bit later or not, but yeah, we're talking about the Skylake X and Kaby Lake X, which have better IPC than the Broadwell E stuff like the 6950X. So the IPC improvement is essentially identical to the mainstream stuff now, meaning slightly better IPC than Ryzen, although not by much. And better clock speeds than Ryzen, of course. But yeah, this is the more updated stuff. But yeah, the 7700K is better than the 6950X for gaming. And to be honest, the 7700K is probably still going to be the best for gaming out of all these. I doubt we're going to be hitting 5 gigahertz on all these. And a lot of 7700Ks will hit 5 gigahertz. So that is, of course, the best for just gaming. But as if you're exclusively gaming and you're willing to overclock to those crazy clock speeds, yes, it'll beat out anything. But also, as my statement has always been, when you have X CPU and X CPU and same everything else, GPU and everything, and X CPU 1 is running at 125 frames per second, and X CPU 2 is running at 135 frames per second, who gives a fuck? You're already at 125 frames per second. It's not enough to really make a difference unless you're, on like a 200 hertz monitor or something. But, those don't exist yet, so.
Not until later this year.
Calvin says we're nerds. Anyway, yeah, so I don't know, Daniel, though, I don't know how I feel about an i5 and a quad-core i7.
I think it's dumb.
I think it's dumb, too.
It's better than the rumor, because the rumor was originally that there was going to be, essentially instead of the i5 existing, it was going to be labeled as an i7.
Yeah, which would make me really sad, because that would be even more ridiculous. Confusing. Yeah.
An i7 that's not hyper-threaded on a desktop, that's called extreme.
Yeah, right. I don't understand this because they literally are taking the same CPUs. Like, I don't even see, maybe they're not including GPUs, which would actually be even weirder because then they're having to make a new die and stuff like that. I'm assuming it has GPUs, you just can't use them, including for QuickSync, which is just really dumb. In case you guys don't know, QuickSync is basically a way for allowing your integrated GPU to do encoding for you for live streaming and stuff like that. So these might not be able to use that. So I don't understand X299, new chipset, freaking huge socket, 2066 pins, and having just these CPUs on there. And a lot of things are going to be disabled. Of course, you're going to have, like I said, less PCI Express bandwidth, less M.2 availability, less U.2 availability. You're disabling half the features of boards just by going with these CPUs.
Yeah.
I have a feeling basically nobody's going to buy them.
Yeah,
that's my feeling. We'll see. Or maybe there is, one other thing I thought of that could maybe be a possibility is maybe people are going to be taking these, and since they're going to overclock to 5 gigahertz ish, they want the better motherboards assuming, they'll still have some stuff disabled. I'm sure they will have to have some stuff disabled on at least most boards unless they have PLX chips. But they'll be able to get the better, more updated platform. And this is going to be higher clock speeds, so they do get better frame rates. Again, which doesn't, in my opinion, matter, half gigahertz or whatever. But that maybe is one incentive why people will buy them. And then they maybe plan to upgrade if they get into content creation, kind of like you were saying. But I don't know. I don't like them. But let's move on before I get too angry.
Also, then real quick, so with some other Intel stuff, the 7900X was overclocked all the way up to over 5.7 gigahertz on liquid nitrogen.
Now, okay, I was going to say, that better be a nitrogen.
Yeah. But that being said, this broke Cinebench's 10-core performance record. So,
which doesn't surprise me. Yeah. I have a feeling when Ryzen 16 core comes out, somebody's going to get it on LN2 up to like 6 gigahertz and just crush everything.
That would be awesome.
Because, I mean, with Ryzen 8 cores, I almost said Ryzen, not Ryzen 8, Ryzen 7, like 1800X, I think somebody hit, like, it was like 6 gigahertz or something. Anyway, continue talking about some of those few little Intel things. I'm going to do a quick research on that.
Okay, yeah, I mean, there's really not much to talk about the overclock. So
hey, Mitch says he's getting the 7820X. I am very happy for you, Mitch. Yeah, I'm actually going to be getting myself later this year. It probably won't be as soon as you. I'm jealous. But probably around, I'd say, September, November, I'm going to be getting either a 7940X or I'm going to be going with the Ryzen 16 core, depending on pricing, depending on clock speeds and the overclocking abilities of these new i9s, depending on what the end-all differences are and any problems that either platform has. So I'm going to wait a while on purpose. I also don't have the money. That's part of why I'm waiting a while. I'm saving for it.
I got if you get Threadripper, then you can own the biggest goddamn CPU.
I know, and so I'm leaning towards Threadripper for myself, especially for my own creation. It's like, yeah, I might lose like 20, 30 frames in some games, again, which to me doesn't really matter, especially because I only have a 75 hertz monitor. But for me, more cores is going to help more for the content creation and the multitasking that I do. So that's what I'm looking for. But right now, my first goal is I'm actually upgrading my server and building a Ryzen rendering machine for doing my transcoding for my video editing. So that's coming first. But anyway, then I'm going to decide. As Mitch says, he's really hoping for at least 4.8 gigahertz clock on it, which is definitely crazy for 8 cores. Yeah, that is indeed. I would guess 4.7, 4.8 is probably going to be achievable on them. It all, I think, really depends on whether the thermal interface material is able to transfer that much heat, because they still can't fucking solder. I guess it's a good transition into the soldering part of this, huh?
Yeah, so Intel decided to once again use Tim for some goddamn reason.
Nobody fucking understands why. Like that, like I can kind of understand on the lower end stuff because Tim tends to be cheaper. It is cheaper.
Yeah.
And Tim does have really it never wears out. Now one of the things that people are talking about, the reasoning behind this, which doesn't make any sense because as Mitch just pointed out, has 6850K is soldered. So basically, one of the excuses people are saying is Intel's worried about longevity, the expanding and contracting when heat goes up and down on these CPUs, causing the solder to eventually crack. But I'm sitting here like, the fuck? I haven't heard of any 6850Ks or fucking 6950Xs having cracked solder. So like, what the fuck? I don't understand why they're going Tim. It doesn't make any sense. And it's pissing everybody off because delitting is a pain in the ass. And apparently, I actually watched delitting by, I think his name is Derbauer or something like that. Yeah. Derbauer did he did a delitting with his delitting tool, and it's really risky. Even he said that it's really, really, really risky, and you're actually fairly likely to ruin the CPU. So
meanwhile, there were people on the r/hardware subreddit that were defending this decision by saying that it's a good thing because super high-end enthusiasts want to delit. Who the fuck's gonna delit a $2,000 processor?
That's my thing, yeah. Like delitting is fun, and I was totally like, even though I personally was like, whatever, on like the back around, with like the 4770Ks and stuff like that, where the TIM sucked and people were delitting constantly. I was like, I'm not gonna delit. I don't really care that much. But if I were wanting to delit, I wouldn't be risking my entire fucking bank account. You know, that's my thing. When you're working on delitting a $300 or $400 CPU, it's like, okay, yeah, you might ruin it, but also on those chips, it was less likely to ruin it. Whereas on the newer, these larger chips, it's really likely that you're going to damage it, and that's really fucked up when you're spending over $1,000 on a processor. Why don't they solder? And my thing is, if AMD has been able to solder since fucking forever, all the FX chips had a soldered IHS. Why can't Intel do it? Why can't Intel figure this out?
Intel can afford it. They just don't want to.
Oh, yeah, pretty much. Mitch just made a good point, too. Enthusiasts want to delid just for the simple reason that it improves thermals on shitty TIM chips. Enthusiasts wouldn't want to delid if it didn't change thermal. Exactly. That's the good point. The whole point of deliding, I mean, yeah, it's kind of a fun project, but the whole reason that you would ever risk doing that is just to get better thermal performance. So, I don't know. That makes me mad. So, anyway, I guess X299 chipset, not a whole lot's changed. I'm actually really disappointed with the X299 chipset myself. I felt like X99 was like a massive leap in what we were able to do with computers. It was like, oh my gosh, these boards are incredible. These features are incredible. You know, we're getting all kinds of just crazy stuff, better M.2 support, U.2 support, all kinds of awesome stuff. And now this time around, it's basically like, well, it has 10 gigabit Ethernet. I hope I'm correct on that. And, you know, yeah, more M.2 ports.
Yep.
Like it feels like Intel was just like, here's X99 with a few tweaks so that we can sell you some new shit with our new CPUs that are still overpriced, but at least better priced. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't really feel very great about X299 myself. So yeah, as Mitch says, 10 gigabit is pretty wild. Yeah, I'll agree. The 10 gigabit NICs are pretty wild, but honestly, just that small change, like I feel like with a chipset change, there needs to be some massive improvements. And even in the Z line of chipsets, every time they've gone up, there have been some pretty major improvements. At Computex this year, I'm not even hearing people making dedicated videos on the changes to the chipsets. They're just talking about the boards. Whereas all the other times the Computex was around and chipsets were released, there was dedicated videos that people made explaining the differences between the old and new chipsets. I haven't seen any breakdown like that so far. And I mean, I watch quite a bit of content out there and just haven't seen a breakdown. So it's kind of confusing to me. Are you playing games, you dick?
Huh?
You're playing games, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're a dick. Computex live stream, like the biggest one of the year, you're playing games?
Yep.
Oh, well, at least I can talk to myself for hours, so I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, but to be fair, when I was working on the dock, you were playing Overwatch.
Shh, I finally got good with Widow.
Right.
Good.
Anyway, let's continue.
So, Turbo Boost 3.0. You talk about this.
Yeah, I did kind of over it. I kind of went over it already.
Okay, I guess. Okay, never mind then. Other Intel news, you talked about the 5.7 gigahertz with liquid nitrogen, correct?
Yep. Yeah, we're pretty much done with Intel. So, yeah. Unless you have more stuff you want to rant about.
Mitch also mentioned DDR4 4000. Yeah, I guess that is kind of cool, but I'm more excited for DDR4 4000 on Ryzen, which we have more on a little bit later, because it actually improves performance with Ryzen, whereas with Intel, you see very minimal improvement, depending on what you're doing, of course, but just because of the way the Ryzen or the Zen architecture works. So, I mean, yeah, it's cool to see. But yeah, I guess my main point is I don't feel like it's that big of a leap. And I also don't understand why they called it X299 instead of X199 when it's basically a fucking refresh of X99.
Yeah.
Rant over. Let's move on to something cool.
Okay. Let's talk about some monitors.
Oh, Mitch said Infinity Fabric is such a stupid name. I'm going to disagree with you on that, but we can agree to disagree. I just personally
don't care about the name.
Yeah, I personally like it, but I think AMD also sucks at naming in general with like Epic. And then what about AMD calling theirs X399? Yeah, I got more on that later. No worries. But yeah, well, they have more actually. I'm going to jump into that right this second because really quick because he's mentioning. So yeah, there's X399 from AMD, which is their new chipset versus the X299 on Intel. There is the B350 from AMD versus the B250 from Intel. There is the X370 versus the Z270 from Intel. They're just one-upping Intel because they're dicks, and I think it's hilarious because it's somewhat subtle, but just loud enough that people are still talking about it. And it's just kind of like, yeah, fuck you, Intel. I love it. It's great. I actually really like AMD doing that. I like to see friendly competition like that. And Radeon and NVIDIA have always been very good about that, but Intel and AMD have not as much. And I like to see AMD poking a little bit because it's just cool. So anyway, monitors. Yeah, let's talk about this beautiful monitor, the PG35.
So it's actually two different monitors. Acer and Asus have monitors that are effectively the same thing.
Doesn't surprise me. Probably the same panel.
Yeah. So what we have is a 3440 by 1440, 21 by 9 ultra wide monitor that runs at 200 hertz.
They're curved.
Huh?
Curved.
Yes, they're curved. They also support G-Sync. They are also quantum dot HDR displays running at 1000 nits and have 512 individual backlights. From all everyone can tell, they are VA panels based on the time frame, because one of the major VA panel manufacturers has an HDR ultra wide 200 hertz VA panel coming out, or that'll be ready for production. Yeah, 1800 R curve. It'll be ready for production in fall. This comes out in Q4, so it makes sense that this would be the panel that we're expecting. So this is a beautiful display. I'm also nicknaming these the buzzword panels because they fill every single buzzword currently on the market for
other than 4K.
Other than OLED
and 4K.
Yeah, but people in gaming care more about ultra wide.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, and I it's a buzzword monitor. But the funny thing is, it meets all of these. I'm actually really excited for this.
So am I.
And I mean, I probably won't be getting one. I'm more of a productivity guy. I need more panels. One is not enough. I'm starting to realize more and more that I need to focus more on the productivity that I do, less as much on gaming. So anyway, though, yeah, I think it's really cool, and I really like seeing VA panels more because they do actually have better response times, but still better color accuracy and better viewing angles than TN. So they're kind of in between TN and IPS, although as we talked about on the stream, I believe before, they can be better than VA panels, or better than IPS panels. They can be better color reproduction and stuff if necessary. But I just like seeing that we're going to get better response time on a panel that can still be for professional work.
Yeah. Also, let me respond to that because I have a little bit more info. So I know he mentions 200 hertz is bonkers as long as there isn't serious ghosting. So there's actually two modes with these panels. There's a 200 hertz standard mode, and then there's also a 144 hertz max ultra low motion blur mode. So you have a couple of choices as far as how you want to use the monitor.
I like that. Kind of just depends on what you're playing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in that case, like if you're doing competitive stuff like CSGO, I'd say probably bump it all the way to 200 hertz. But if you're playing something a little more casual, I'd probably drop mine to 144. There isn't a massive, really realistically too, when going from 144 to 200, there isn't a massive increase in fluidity. All I see really is the idea behind these higher refresh rates being more so for better response time, because you still are able to respond a few milliseconds faster. And every step of the way in your computer, as you reduce everything by a few more milliseconds, all of a sudden you're looking at, maybe 10, 15 millisecond difference that can make the headshot or not. So, yeah. Yeah, as he's saying, the overclock modes on these monitors, dirty little secret is the ghosting it introduces. Yeah, unfortunately, ghosting, it's not so good.
Yeah, but, you want to talk about ghosting. So Sony
released...
Okay. Sony had released I love this idea, and I wish they would do a new one. They released a monitor, or like a TV, quote unquote, specifically for the PlayStation 3 that had 3D support. And on top of that, it had a really unique feature that allowed for taking advantage of the way 3D works in order to introduce a better option for local multiplayer. So the way 3D works for most monitors, especially for the ones that have active glasses, is that the glasses flicker alternately so that the monitor refreshes really fast, so that essentially every other frame is for different eyes. And so what Sony did was, instead of having split screen, or instead of having 3D, they had one set of the 3D glasses running on one set of the frames, and one set of the 3D glasses running on another set. So essentially you'd have 120 hertz give you 60 FPS for both people.
And were both 3D? I can't remember. Were they both actually also 3D, or was it just like the glasses
when you
just
were
made
in
it 2D?
When you were in this mode and playing two people, it was 2D because
I would assume
it was taking
200. Right, you would need like 240 hertz in order to do that. Yeah. But I'm just getting at. Yeah,
but it was a fantastic idea. But I had it, and the 3D was absolutely god awful. It was so horribly ghosting. I returned it specifically because of that. I tried watching Avatar and got sick within 20 seconds because it was just double images the entire time.
That's terrible. Jeez.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I didn't even know you had it. How was the dual 2-player?
I mean, the problem was that the ghosting ruined it.
Oh, okay. Made it just not really work. That's
Yeah.
unfortunate. It's a really cool idea.
Yeah. Now, one thing I like the idea of Sony releasing console-specific displays. I don't know why because like, look at right now. You have the PlayStation 4, the regular one that supports 1080p and HDR, and then you have the PS4 Pro that supports 4K HDR. I would love if they released something like a 24 or 27-inch 1080p HDR display that worked with the PS4, allowed people to get that advantage, and is another thing that Sony can sell to make a profit off of. And then they release a 4K HDR panel that's like 27 or 32 inches. That would, again, be the same thing, but for the PS4 Pro.
PC people would buy them too.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be something that would be useful, especially for content creators.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Also, as Mitch says, he hopes we start seeing some FreeSync TVs. And the big hope is that Scorpio will have FreeSync 2.0 support. Yeah, I really hope that Scorpio does. I have a feeling it will. It doesn't cost any extra to implement, so I don't see why not if they're going with AMD hardware. There's no real reason I see anything with AMD hardware should not have FreeSync anymore. I mean, laptops, everything are having.
So the thing that I think will happen is that if I feel like hardware-wise, it'll obviously have it. Software-wise, it'll be maybe at launch. It'll essentially be up to if they can get TV manufacturers to start supporting FreeSync.
Which I hope they will. It doesn't cost them anything either.
Yeah. The problem that Microsoft would have is if they started marketing it as FreeSync, and if they started marketing it as FreeSync to console manufacturers, or to console buyers, then you'd run into the issue of, since a majority of console players still play on televisions, they would see this feature, they'd buy it, and have literally no way to use it. It's not just a matter of them not buying the right TV, it's them not being able to play on a TV at all. So I feel like what would be likely to happen if they didn't have TV manufacturer support at the beginning would be for them to software add it in later.
Right, which wouldn't surprise me at all. But the hardware support's going to be there. So, yeah, as Mitch is also saying, TV manufacturers are always looking to come up with the next gimmick to sell TVs. This would actually be huge for gamers because it's actually a meaningful upgrade. I totally agree with that. Yeah, TV manufacturers piss me off because they're always like, smart motion 240 hertz. And it's like, it's still a 60 hertz panel, you asshole. So, yeah, I really hope that TV manufacturers actually grab onto this and realize, an actual upgrade that costs us next to nothing that will actually benefit people and actually incentivize them to buy our TVs. Yeah. That'd be super cool.
Especially since FreeSync 2 supports HDR, and every TV that's coming out now that's 4K is going to be an HDR TV.
Exactly, yeah. And if we can get Plex media server to support FreeSync like it does G-Sync, because it does G-Sync, right?
Yes.
Yeah, then we could have TVs that run at whatever frame rate the movie's running at, because like you said, so you can have your actual panel refresh at 24 hertz. For the movies, so that'd be super cool. Yeah. Oh yeah. Mention people at Best Buy say it's 240 hertz, and it's like it's not. That's not how it works. Oh, it's so frustrating. God bless Best Buy.
Well, it's not even Best Buy. It's also it's partially Best Buy, but it's also the TV manufacturers themselves using stupid fake gimmicks to try and boost the refresh rate.
Yeah, and they don't do anything. Yeah, like interpolation. Yeah. They don't help. It's just the thing you turn on, and it's like I have my 4K TV over here and all these little like special features that I'm just like off, because all I know is it's just adding latency when I'm using my Switch and stuff, because Samsung's just adding these processing things in there that do next to nothing. There's no real visual difference. We should probably continue with the monitor and tech news, though, because we still have, 2 pages.
Yeah, that's true. So that's pretty much it for there's other monitor announcements, but that was the important one.
Yeah. Did we get into the HDR brightness?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you talk about? I misheard. Then did you talk about the individual backlights?
Yes, I mentioned it.
Good. Just making sure.
512 is kind of the standard for G-Sync HDR for ultrawide, so expect that to be pretty much normal.
Right. Okay. Also, Mitch, don't apologize for derailing us. That's part of the fun. We like seeing people commenting, so it's all good. No, we like to derail. I'll probably pass out while driving at work tomorrow, but whatever.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. No.
Next up, this is, for me personally, one of the things I am most excited about announcement-wise.
I am
for
as
these
well.
companies. NVIDIA's Max-Q. So this is a brand new, essentially, way that they handle setting up their GPUs for laptops. This is going to be on the 1060, 1070, and 1080, although 1080 is the important functionality or the important card for this.
Which actually makes sense considering what they're doing. They need to use higher end cards for it. So it makes sense.
So this is essentially allowing very, very high-end GPUs to run in ultrabook-like devices. So you're looking at like MacBook Air thickness laptops with 1080s in them. So it's essentially, they're saying it's going to run at about 50% the power consumption while hitting about 90% of the performance. So if you're wondering how they do that, there's quite a few different things. So first off, they use essentially a custom clock curve designed for low voltage.
And don't be surprised if these numbers are exaggerated a little bit too. Yeah.
I think that this is like their ideal numbers is 90% performance.
Right,
this
but we might be seeing like 60% power with like 80%, which is still a massive thing. So
so you have the low voltage optimized clock curves. You have custom or like modified versions of game ready drivers that are optimized for efficiency specifically. You have new, essentially, like I think from what I can tell, NVIDIA did their own R&D on thermals, because this seems to be something that they're kind of saying is standard across the lineup, but they're using new advanced thermal technology. And then on top of that, there is essentially the best.
Maybe they're soldering their IHS.
They're using the best available power regulators targeting efficiency specifically to try and help with that as well. So all in all, it's just a whole bunch of tech that they've been working on for a while, specifically to make the 1080 and other high-end GPUs work in very, very thin laptops. So all in all, I'm very excited about that. I mean, you look at it, I mean, just look up Max-Q. There's quite a few laptops that have been shown off that look absolutely beautiful. And they're thin laptops, very nice, something I would be happy to just stick in a backpack or something. All in all, it's, I mean, a 10 out of 10 announcement. In my opinion, this is exactly the type of stuff I've been hoping for from NVIDIA. And it also makes sense since NVIDIA spent a ton of money on Pascal. And
yeah, they did.
We knew that they, dumped a bunch of money in and they got some good performance, but the fact that we're seeing stuff like this makes the amount of money they spent. I mean, it was enough to fund a Mars mission, for reference.
Right. Well, at this point, though, this is what I've been saying about NVIDIA for a long time. I am proud of them as a company because they're like, we're dominating the market. We have lots of extra money. Let's throw it into figuring shit out. And so they keep investing massive amounts of money to actually improve things, with Volta coming out sooner, with this Max-Q stuff. I'm actually, sure, NVIDIA is, the end game is they're investing to make a profit. But I still think it's cool because I feel like, especially more than certain companies, Intel, they're investing their money back into innovating despite there being basically no competition for them right now. And that says something about the integrity of them as a company, as well as, some of the things they're doing with their new headquarters and stuff like that with renewable energy. But I actually wanted to touch on something Mitch said really quick. So first off, he said he wants to come and derail the show from the inside. I'd love to have you on, buddy. So yeah, we'll have to figure that out because Daniel and I are going to start doing these WordCasts in person. So we'll have to figure out a service to use with OBS and do that sometime. That'd be super cool. So yeah, definitely invited on. And then he's also saying that it's the Max-Q stuff's crazy because his Acer laptop with the GTX 1060 is less than an inch thick, and he thought that was crazy. Yeah, and even that gets really hot. Yeah, which doesn't surprise me. Yeah, and the 1060 is awesome in a laptop. But yeah, it's amazing what NVIDIA is being capable of doing. And also, of course, the laptop cooling is really being engineered specially. So that's something to keep in mind, people, too. Yeah. And then he's also saying NVIDIA takes a lot of flack, but as a company, they're absolutely crushing it. And I totally agree with that. As looking at them just from a company standpoint, not even from a product standpoint, I think they're doing all the right things that a company in their position should be doing.
Yeah.
And that's really impressive to me. Again, there's a certain level of integrity that NVIDIA seems to have with what they're doing. And that is super cool to see. So, yeah, definitely, something I'm impressed with them overall, I guess is what I'll say.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can't really think of a product they've done since Tegra on phones that's been a flop in any way. I mean, you look at Tegra on the Switch is 10 out of 10 fantastic for what they're doing. I mean, they're making it easy to port x86 games over to it. It runs pretty damn well. It's power efficient enough that you can get a few hours out of a very, very tiny device. It's, very, very fantastic. We're seeing stuff like this, and like with Max-Q, it supports all of the features of like GeForce cards. You're not losing anything by choosing this. You get G-Sync support, you get 4K,
right.
You get HDR.
You're just losing some performance,
refresh
which
rates.
is, I mean, well, the thing is, you're paying a premium for it. You got to keep that in mind too. Is you're paying the price tag of a 1080 laptop plus more, because obviously it's an ultra portable, ultra thin laptop, so it's going to have more research and development into the cooling system, the batteries, stuff like that. So it's going to be a more expensive machine outright. But then you also have to remember you're paying the 1080 price on top of that, and you're only getting 80 to 90% of the 1080's performance. So that's something that has to be kept in mind. It's going to be niche at first. Yeah.
Now, that being said, as far as like the lower end stuff, like the 1060 version of the Max-Q, that they're expecting to start at about $1,200.
And that doesn't surprise me, because the power consumption is going to be so much lower on those that they might not need to super engineer the cooling system and stuff like that to make it function.
That's the thing, though. It being Max-Q means it's having this advanced tech. They already have super thin 1060s.
Right, but I guess what I mean is unless it's the exact same chassis from like Asus and then the same chassis for their 1080 and their 1060 model, unless that's the case, there's other engineering things that could be done behind the scenes on the laptop company side is what I mean. What they do with their cooling. And stuff like that. But I'm really excited for this. I think this is a cool thing. I've been really wanting to see better performance in thin, light gaming laptops. Something eventually I'd like to replace my Ultrabook with something that can actually do a little bit of gaming on the go with still having good battery life. Would love to see that. Would love to take it to school, especially since I'm going to be going back to school this year or next year or something. It'd be nice to have something like that instead of my bulky, massive monster.
So one example of a laptop that they showed off was the ROG Zephyrus. This laptop weighs 2.2 kilograms, and it's a whopping 18 millimeters thick. It supports GTX 1080. It also has 4K support in a laptop that's 18 millimeters thick.
It's pretty cool. Basically, it's pretty cool. I also wanted to touch on a few comments. So Joe said, what about a 1030 in a laptop or a tablet or iPad? And Mitch is like, even a 1050. Yeah, I think that would actually be something that's really cool. Even a 1030, even if it's not a 1050, would be something where you could have like a super thin device, like a tablet or something, that could really push graphics performance to another level. But I don't know if NVIDIA is going to invest in that, because we already have pretty great graphics performance on devices that thin. You're not really going to be playing like big AAA titles on devices that thin. And while it might be cool, hooking up a keyboard and mouse to a tablet would be a little bit awkward. So I think ARM is still captured around that, and the way that that Qualcomm and stuff is using their Adreno GPUs.
Especially with Windows 10 getting some more advanced ARM support soon.
Yeah, I did hear about that. Also, Mitch is saying, have we talked about the disappointing Vega delay yet? Well, I went ahead and read that to maybe keep some people around. But no, we haven't yet. We're going to. We're getting to the AMD news here pretty soon. It's actually our next topic coming up here pretty quick. Yeah. Is there any tablets with actual dedicated GPUs, though, rather than an SoC? No, unless you talk about 2-in-1 tablets with detachable keyboards.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But I could see some really, I could see some, like, really amazingly thin laptops for a decent price with like a 1050 in it or a 1050 Ti. Yeah. And that'd be cool. $1,000, you get a good laptop, but you get like 12 gigs of RAM, you get, maybe, a quad-core CPU, but probably a dual-core. But, something where it's like, this is my school machine, but I want to boot up Minecraft or Overwatch or something like that and get decent frame rates at decent settings. And yeah, or even if you want to play some intensive game at like the lowest settings and get 60, 70 frames per second. boom. I mean, those GPUs like the 1050, for example, perform really good. So I would love to have like something like the size of an XPS 13, where it's actually a 13-inch super small laptop that I could go ahead and boot up Witcher on at, low to medium settings running over 60 frames per second. That'd be super awesome. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one other thing real quick as far as the NVIDIA stuff goes. So they also announced something called Whisper Mode. Now, this is not specific to Max-Q, although Max-Q will be able to take advantage of it because any Pascal-based laptop will be able to. Essentially what this is it uses a mix of GeForce Experience-specific settings along with some kind of new method to like auto pace frame rate.
It lowers the frame rate. Basically, it's having the GPU work not as hard by keeping the frame rate at a specific level. It's like a frame rate lock, but better.
Yeah, it's like a better version. But it's essentially just done all with the goal of making the laptops run, well, whisper quiet, since it's, whisper mode.
Watch them be really loud.
yeah. Watch them be as loud as the 11,000 RPM fan.
No, they'll sound like a razor blade.
No, that server you gave me.
Oh God, the server I gave you. That thing's loud. I still need to come install Linux on that for you.
Yeah, you do.
I gotta do that. But anyway, Whisper Mode.
So that's it. Let's jump into AMD since there's a ton of that, and then a bunch of smaller topics.
Fucking enormous right now.
Yeah.
So let's bump into this. Oh, there's a few comments that we okay, just making sure there wasn't any comments that we need to talk about in specific. So lots of AMD news. I'll mostly be touching up on this because I'm a dick and I handle all the AMD shit, but also I decided to follow the live blogs when AMD was talking about their stuff. So obviously, the biggest thing first, because we are very anticlimactic here, Threadripper. So more announcements on Threadripper. A little bit disappointing because we didn't exactly get any more information when it comes to launch date, pricing, stuff like that, like we were hoping, whereas Intel already released that stuff. And I thought AMD would be prepared to release that stuff since Intel already was. Little unfortunate there. But anyway, I'll continue. So Threadripper, we already knew that it was going to be 16 cores and 32 threads. AMD already confirmed that. We already knew it's coming in summer of 2017, probably the end of Q4-ish. So, I mean, we're probably talking like August, maybe October, or not October, August, something, probably August is my guess. But we'll see how it happens. I guess it could potentially be, October. But anyway, what they did confirm a little bit more stuff, 64 PCIe 3.0 lanes for Threadripper. 64 compared to the 44 on Intel. That is a big deal, especially when it's, when it comes to the prosumer market and the workstation market. PCI Express lanes actually matter a lot. And the 44 were already being maxed out on Intel's side, or the 40.
Which, and as I talked to you about, is extremely annoying to me because Intel is developing a ton of special tech that only works on Intel CPUs that is specifically would require PCIe lanes like, Optane.
And they have server chips with more PCIe lanes as far as I know. So
it's because I think that the big thing here, and this is what's screwing Intel, is they've spent so much time building a massive gap between the consumer products and the server products, and that comes from not just the features like PCI lanes, but also things like the core counts. And now that Threadripper's coming and they're being forced to compete, at least on some level, with the high core counts especially, they're still trying to find something that they can use to keep people from not buying Xeons and instead buying just the i9s.
Yeah, right, exactly. And it's frustrating that Intel's kind of bitten themselves in the ass by segregating those things so much. I want to touch on a couple comments before they go away. So he's saying, Mitch is saying, so the socket's huge. Yeah, I'll get to that a little bit in a moment. But also, so it's really annoying that the i7s, it's really unfortunate that the i7s, they are only 28 PCIe lanes. They're not bumping up to the 44. We were actually talking about that a little bit before you joined, I believe, Mitch. Yeah, it's really freaking stupid. It's making me mad that you have to go with an i9 for the 44 lanes. It's like one of the main points, and Intel understands one of the main points is lanes, and so that's why they're doing that. It's just to pull more money. Now, as for Brock is asking, he wants to know some stuff about gaming PC. He wants to know a good price. Well, as Mitch is saying, actually, so they're there are groups on Google Plus. Actually, there's one that Mitch and I are both part of. So yeah, Mitch, you're welcome to link that in chat. I won't be offended if you link that Google Plus.
I don't think it will let him link it.
It might not, but I'm just saying if it lets you, you're welcome to go ahead and do that. But yeah, on a live stream, I'm not really going to be willing to do that. I might be making an intro to PC video soon to kind of help newcomers. Really glad to see you here, Brock, though. Very cool to see you watching this. And definitely, I would love to help you, but right now we got to get to the tech news. But $700 is a pretty good budget for a pretty great gaming PC. So anyway, continuing with Threadripper. So 60 of those PCIe 3.0 lanes are on the CPU directly. 4 of them are actually on the X399 chipset. Now, kind of funny, X399 versus X299. Intel, like I was saying earlier, AMD bumped up over Intel by 1. It's pretty funny. But anyway, yeah. So 60 on the CPU directly, which is quite a bit of lanes directly to the CPU, and the 4 on the chipset are probably just mostly, I don't know, we don't really know all the details yet, but I'm guessing they might be for another M.2 slot, or they might just be dedicated towards like USB and stuff like that, or just other interface connections and stuff like that. Wow, I'm out of focus. That is, wow, that is so terrible. Okay, wait, okay, it's like focus literally like an inch in front of it. I do not know why it's that way. There we go, guys. Sorry about that. So they did confirm quad channel DDR4 support, which is pretty awesome. I do like seeing that. Of course, we kind of expected that, but it allows up to 128 gigabytes of RAM. Again, no pricing yet, but the socket is freaking enormous. I mean, we're looking like, that big. And then there's also the TR4 is the name for the socket. So, yeah. Pretty interesting.
I just want to bring up really quick because I don't see it mentioned in this. I just want to specify how happy I am that it's using LGA style socket,
which is cool. I was going to mention that later, but all good, all good. I'm mentioning more about the chipset and socket in specific later. But yeah. So like you say, it's LGA, which is really cool. I actually think that AMD is doing the exact right thing by going with LGA on this versus PGA. Now, for those of you who don't know, PGA is pin grid array and LGA is land grid array. Now, the difference is basically PGA has actual little pins that come out of the bottom of the CPU that go into little holes on the motherboard. And the LGA instead essentially has those holes on the CPU. It's really, they call it LAN because it's really it's kind of just a flat surface kind of on the bottom. And then the actual pins are on the motherboard sticking up out of the motherboard. Now, I actually really like the way AMD is doing this, and I'll explain why. So basically, we've got motherboards and CPU prices can be completely flip-flopped depending on what platform you go on. So when you're looking at the lower-end platform, I actually prefer to see the pins on the CPU because the CPU, I'm trying to figure out how exactly I want to put this. So I actually prefer to see a PGA style on a CPU on the lower-end stuff because it's not as dangerous to damage a cheap CPU. When you're going to the really high-end stuff, the motherboard oftentimes is actually cheaper than the CPU itself. And so when you're spending $2,000 or something like that, or $1,000 on a CPU and only say $300-400 on a motherboard, I like to see the actual pins on the motherboard because that way, if something is to be damaged, it's going to be the pins on the board, not the LGA style on the CPU. So that way, your more expensive component is not ruined.
Yeah.
So I actually do prefer to see it that way myself. On the lower end stuff, there is the chance, it's more likely that you're going to be spending more on the board than the CPU. So it's better to have the CPU break. Either way, it's not as big of a deal. And I think it's probably a little bit cheaper to manufacture boards with PGA style inputs. So that's kind of something nice there. So yeah, as Mitch is saying, it's very smart of them to go with LGA on the high-end platform. Yeah, I totally agree. So, and as Joe said, the socket literally is almost the size of a mini ITX board. Yeah, I believe it's about, the socket is about a quarter the size of an MITX board.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
As I mentioned to you earlier, I hope that, because if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be ASRock. I hope ASRock finds some ridiculous way to make an ITX board that uses like some ridiculous like riser card setup.
I'm sure they're going to fucking figure it out, man. I'm sure they're going to figure it out.
If anyone does, it will be them.
Yeah, it's just going to be weird, and it won't work in most SFF cases, even though the whole point is small form factor on ITX. It'll just be them saying, "Hey, we did it." So
it would work on what's that new ridiculously large ITX and is it also ATX case that was shown off at
I'm not
Computex? I think it was
Can we talk about the Fantech stuff that's like home theater, the really tall ones.
It was one that
Was it one that Harbor Connects talked about?
yes.
It was the really tall ones with glass.
Yeah, the ridiculously tall.
Yeah, they're designed for home theater. I actually can't remember the actual names myself, but
The
yeah,
shift.
the shifts. Yeah, they might work in that. But yeah. Let's see. Mitch is actually asking a question that I want to address. So, did anyone else see some budget X299 motherboards with only 4 RAM slots, or did I dream that up? You dreamed half of that up. So, there are some X299 boards with only 4 DIMM slots. And the reasoning for that actually is not to lower the cost. Those boards are actually very expensive. It's to increase overclocking potential. So when you have multiple DIMMs going into a single channel for memory, it makes it harder to overclock those DIMMs to as high of a performance level. And so the idea, I believe EVGA was the only one that did that, is they basically made it so that you have 1 channel per DIMM, which allows you to still do a pretty crazy amount of RAM for a consumer system. And especially if you're overclocking, you probably don't need more RAM than that. Probably, but it allows them to overclock the RAM higher and therefore overall just get better overclocking on the board. It's just a small little thing that they can do that doesn't make a massive difference, but it's enough to have a small incentive if you're buying the board specifically for overclocking, which we know that's going to be one of the hugest things when it comes to the X299 versus the AMD X399 stuff. One of the hugest deciding factors for enthusiasts is going to be overclocking. We already know that's going to be a thing, and anything that X299 can do to improve overclocking differently, I think is going to help them out. So yeah. So more about AMD. I'll talk a little bit more about the socket right now, actually, because it wouldn't make sense to talk about other things first. So X399. Now I still find it hilarious that it's X399 versus Intel's X299. It just makes me laugh. Yes. Also, Mitch, I'm about to talk about the DIMM.2. I will be talking about ASUS's DIMM.2, the extra DIMM slot. So anyway,
you're DIMM.2.
You're a DIMM.2. No, you're a U.2. U.2.
I need to drink some coffee.
Coffee? I hate you.
Better than you.
Oh, it's so good. So yeah, anyway, X399. So like I said, 4 PCI Express 3.0 lanes on the chipset. We don't exactly know what they are doing on the chipset for, but I'm sure it's going to be for something basic because 60 to the CPU. You're going to want most things directly connected to the CPU. It is common for the X399 boards, at least in the ATX and the like XL and eATX form factors. I'm not sure. I don't even know if we saw any micro ATX form factor boards yet. Correct me if I'm wrong, anybody in the comments. But anyway, yeah. So we're looking at 3 M.2 ports being very, very, very common on these boards, which I find really cool. I do like seeing more M.2 support, especially on workstation grade hardware. It's definitely, SSDs are becoming a more and more important factor when it comes to workstation based tasks. And so I like to see the availability of having so much SSD storage. And another common thing, and this is for your fast SSD storage. Of course, you can still, use SATA SSDs. I don't think those are going anywhere anytime soon. But another cool thing is a lot of these boards, and actually including on the X299 stuff from Intel, a lot of M.2s are now coming with heat sinks, which I do like because the M.2 drives are getting so fast. Now we're having SSDs that need fucking heat sinks. I mean, what a world we live in. But I think it's pretty awesome to see SSDs with heat sinks and to see that we're needing that just to improve performance even more. But there are cases of like 960 Pros and stuff throttling because of temperatures. So I like seeing more of that. There was quite a bit of boards showing heat sinks for the SSDs. And especially if you're going to have a lot of SSDs close together, a lot of M.2 SSDs close together. Now, again, I mentioned here again how fucking massive this socket is, the TR4 socket for the X399. It is just ridiculous. Like I said, holding it up to my face. It's like this big of a socket. I'm not kidding. You could look through it if it was a hole in the fucking board. It's insane. And I'm also excited to see water blocks for this socket because those water blocks are going to be massive, which is really cool. Yeah. Oh yeah. Mitch also mentioned, there are fans on some of these boards for the NVMe slots for the M.2 SSDs. I think that's really cool too. Active cooling on storage. The last time I saw that was back when very rarely people would liquid cool their hard drives by putting cold plates on the top of the hard drive. not opening it up, just on the top of the metal hard drive and running liquid through that, which, I mean, probably did help longevity with the motor, although I don't think that's something we can really, judge very accurately. Motor longevity can be a really tough thing, but that's the only thing that helped, but people just fucking did it. So, I haven't seen any active cooling on that. It's pretty cool.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mitch is also saying his 950 Pro is stays super cool. Yeah, I mean, I would say it would depend on what you're hammering it with. If you were doing like, 300 or 400 gigabytes of cineform video and you were editing it, on a computer or something like that, where you're just pulling massive amounts of data off of that SSD constantly, which is the kind of stuff that I end up doing, it can really start to stress it out. But also,
or if you're MKBHD and you have like 8K cameras.
Right. Well, basically, anytime you're doing massive, consistent data transfers, and that's like something I do, where actually, surprisingly, 4K footage editing off of right now I'm using RAID 0 hard drives because my SSD is not big enough to hold my Cineform stuff. But actually, it's not too terrible off of that. But when you have an 8-minute video being 40 gigabytes worth of files, and you're having to scrub through that back and forth constantly, you need some seriously consistent fast transfers. So. More about X299, 128 gigabytes of RAM support on 8-DIMM motherboards. A lot of RAM there. I really like to see that. I personally am excited just to see more RAM because, I'm a whore for storage and RAM and power supplies because I'm fucking weird. But, that I totally nerd out about the amount of RAM that you can fit on a board. And maybe I'll end up pushing my system to 128, even though I'll never fucking...
Not enough. 256 or bust.
Right. I mean, I have 40 in my laptop, and my whatever I go with next is going to have 64, but maybe I'll go up. Now, 4 X16 PCIe 3.0 slots are common. Now, it's really interesting to me to see a lot of the X399 boards, and some of the X299, but most of the X399 boards that are full ATX seem to be having 4 properly spaced X16 PCIe 3.0 slots. Which interests me because that almost makes me wonder if AMD, as they haven't said they've killed it off at all, but obviously they said that they haven't. But I'm wondering if the Quadfire stuff is going to be a big thing with Vega. Because that's one thing I was actually thinking is even if Vega and single GPU form factor can't beat a 1080 Ti, say it's like 1080 level performance, if you can have 4 of them, you're going to get assuming scaling works okay, so it would depend on the game, it would depend on drivers, of course, all that stuff. But I'm saying, assuming everything works out properly, you could see a situation where you can get better gaming performance out of a Vega system, albeit maybe at a little bit of a price premium and obviously a power consumption premium, but you'd actually be able to beat out like dual Titan X's and stuff like that simply because you can have 4 of them. But of course, as Mitch said, that's assuming a lot. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I don't believe that Vega is not going to support Quadfire. I think AMD wants to keep that at least in there as an option just for fun, even if it's hardly supported, just because I don't think it's really going to cost them any money. And it's something that kind of still gives people a very slight incentive to go to Vega over like NVIDIA. So I think it's something that AMD will leave in there. I fully expect them to leave it in there. Now, whether or not it actually functions good is pretty unlikely. What my guess is it'll be kind of like the way SLI has been with NVIDIA, where there's those handful of like 5 to 10 games that are pretty dang good, and like 2 of them that are really good at multi-GPU support. And it might be the same case for AMD, but it'd still be cool to see like, freaking triple 4K monitors running at like 120 hertz or 120 FPS on some game that's optimized properly for it. Again, though, that's kind of dreaming. Now, on X299, wireless Wi-Fi AD is a thing now. I'm not going to get into a whole bunch of detail about that because that could take an hour. But
and basically, then we'll briefly touch on AD later on when I talk about something for the 5.
Yes. Wireless AD, though. So, cool to see beyond AC being supported when it comes to the Wi-Fi on these boards. 10 gigabit Ethernet. That's a huge deal to me. Whatever board I'm going to get is going to have 10 gigabit, although I think it looks like maybe all of them are going to anyway. But I'm going to be getting a 10 gigabit switch probably too, because Asus actually has a consumer one out now, and a PCIe 10 gigabit card for my server. It's also going to be running Ryzen or for my storage server because I do a lot of data transfers to that. So it'd be really nice actually to have a 10 gigabit little network here for my render machine and my server and my main machine. So I'm excited for that, especially being built in, meaning it's gotten cheap enough that it's not going to cost as much. And we might see costs of like 10 gigabit add-in cards do that. Let's see. Mitch says it's still possible to do quad SLI. This is true. It's still technically possible, but the point I'm getting at is it's not something, with AMD, I think it'll be a simple setting in their software. It just might not work very well. And then the socket, to give you another example of just how fucking huge it is, 4,096 pins on that land grid array. Intel's is 2,066, and that's bigger than their 2,033 of last gen. So fucking huge socket. Very cool, though. So now I'm going to go ahead and touch on a few more things. AMD, I'm trying to get through this quick. We're getting a little bit low on time, although I may stay late just because it's Computex. So DIM.2 is a thing from Asus. I believe it's exclusive to Asus, meaning they'll probably charge a premium for it. But it was shown off on Asus's X299 board. Right next to the 8 DIM slots, there was a little slot that looked kind of like a DIM slot, but a little bit shorter. It is called a DIM.2. Basically what it is it's a new interface for connecting M.2 M.2 drives in a DIM type form factor. So it's about the height, like I said, of a DDR4 slot, but it holds 2 drives.
It's actually closer to a DDR3 slot, by the way.
Closer height, size wise.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. So they're pretty similar is the point. But it holds 2 SSDs. And they're in like I said, a DIM-like form factor, which is actually really, really cool. So a lot of boards for a while, in order to fit more M.2 drives on them, some of the things they were doing is they were removing PCI Express slots, or they were actually standing the drives up fucking vertical. So you've got like the board here, and you've got a drive sticking up here. The problem with that, albeit pretty good for thermals actually, is you end up in a situation where you're more likely to break it off, even with the reinforced brackets. It looks ugly. It gets in the way of cable management. It can get in the way of airflow, albeit basically no real performance degradation there, but it does technically get in the way. But the biggest fucking thing is it just looks really ugly, and nobody likes ugly systems when they're spending this much on a system if you're an enthusiast, not a workstation type stuff. So basically, in order to
don't know people's preferences.
Right, people might like long sticking up thingies that are called
somebody might specifically be trying to build a
solid state hard drive.
Somebody might be trying to build an ugly build.
Yeah, maybe so. They're solid. I'm going to keep emphasizing the solid.
Okay. I think it's liquid.
So anyway, these DIM.2 ports, though, are really cool because that way you're having SSDs that are M.2 performance and everything that aren't sticking way out of the board. They stick up about as high as the DIMs, a little bit lower, actually. So they don't look super out of place. They don't look super ugly. They still get the better airflow that M.2 laying flat on the board doesn't. So you shouldn't need heat sinks or anything like that for them. And it takes up less space on the board. I think this is a genius way to do it. I just hope that it actually catches on and we see some DIM.2 drives that are based on like 960 Pros and stuff like that. So we don't end up in a situation where it's awkward and they're not very good drives or not supported properly or something. But I do like seeing Asus. Asus, in my opinion, has always been at the top of innovation for like 90% of things that happen on motherboards, and everybody else follows. I'll give ASRock the We Do Small Things award, basically. But for the most part, I think Asus is the one that's really been pushing the bar, and I like to see this happening, and this is a really cool thing. Maybe more companies will copy this. Maybe it's not going to be a proprietary Asus thing. Maybe other motherboard manufacturers are going to be allowed to implement it. This is the whole reason that I'm actually going to be waiting for a while before I decide whether I'm going to upgrade to Threadripper or Intel's new Extreme stuff, Skylake X. I'm going to wait a while just to see what else comes out.
Yeah. I'm going to bam out a couple of super quick AMD Ryzen stuff just to get it out of the way before we move on to like the mobile and the Vega. So 2 things. There was a big patch for Rise of the Tomb Raider that was a performance patch for Ryzen. We haven't seen performance numbers for anything other than 1080p really, but we're looking at about 19 FPS gains in 1080p, which is pretty nice. Seeing as how there was already one performance patch that gave I think it was like 20 to 30 FPS in that patch.
Right, and this was one of the big points, actually, that a lot of people were making, is people were complaining that in some cases we're getting like 20, 30, even 40 frames below what the Intel like 7700K was going to do, and they were blaming it all on clock speed, but realistically it was partially just not optimization for the architecture because it's new.
So Rise of the Tomb Raider did get a little bit of a speed boost in that game. And then
I love that.
Noctua showed off some Threadripper specific CPU coolers. This is
Of
going to
course,
be
they're
one of
the
those,
first to the game.
yeah, this is going to be one of those cases where you're not just going to be able to use most basic bitch CPU coolers because the CPU is so much bigger than normal.
Yeah. Not only that, I'm guessing the TDP is going to be somewhere in the 200 plus watt range. I mean,
Yeah.
Ryzen is power efficient, but 16 fucking cores is a lot of fucking cores. And so, I mean, if you look at like it's 155 watt TDP for the 8-core Ryzen stuff. So, you know, looking at that in specific, it's like, well, when you focus on that, that's doubling. That's over 300 watts. So, just saying.
Now the leak from a while ago that we had suggested that the TDP of the top tier Threadripper would only be 155 watts.
I don't
Just
believe that
saying.
because I think. Oh, I must have. Oh, yeah, I read that leak. My information. Ignore what I said. I am so sorry. It's not 155 watt for the 8-core. It's like 95 watts. My bad.
Yeah.
But I would guess it's still going to be higher unless the clock speeds are pretty low. But maybe they'll be running them at like 3.2 gigahertz with a boost.
This has it at 3.5, boosting to 3.9.
Okay, yeah, that's right. I read about that leak too. I'm just having a brain fart. Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. That sounds about right. And then probably overclock into 4.1, maybe 4.2 if we're lucky. I haven't seen anybody yet actually try and run long-term Ryzen overclocking with higher voltages and maybe higher temps. I would like to see somebody with a really good liquid cooling system pump more voltage than is safe because, as we know, all GPU architectures are different, and maybe Ryzen can handle. Huh?
You said GPU.
Sorry. All CPU architectures are different, and so maybe Ryzen can handle a higher voltage than, say, Intel without damaging it, as long as the temperatures obviously can be kept low enough. So that's something I would like to see somebody try some more long-term, trying to hit 4.3, 4.5-ish gigahertz if they can on Ryzen without it crashing. So, you know, we'll see. Also, Mitch made a good point. People seem to completely forget about how much of a mess X299 was at launch, and then they turn around and talk shit about AM4. That's a very good point, too. Yeah, people were, and, you know, not only are they launching a new motherboard, they're launching an entire new lineup of new architecture CPUs. So it's like the fact that it's been as good as it has been is pretty fucking awesome. So, yeah, totally agree. Okay, I'll bump into a few more things. And did we talk about the laptop yet? I don't think we talked about the.
No, he went straight from the Threadripper straight to chipset. So we need.
Did I even add the laptop stuff in here?
8-core Ryzen on laptops, Asus for just. It's right under the Frontier Edition. Right.
I don't know why I'm missing this. I feel like
I just typed a whole bunch of random letters, so you should look for that.
Oh, yeah, I skipped over that, didn't I?
Yeah.
My bad. Or we haven't got to that. Okay, I'm so sorry. Okay, so more AMD news. Now I'm going to try and jump through this a little bit quicker because Daniel has some cool stuff to talk about too, although I guess it's Computex, so when it comes to Computex, it's computer stuff that matters.
Well, there's also more computer stuff too.
Yes, this is true. So RX Vega, the gaming cards, not the Frontier Edition stuff, little bit more information on that. Is going to be officially announced. So they announced an announcement date for the it's going to be at SIGGRAPH, I think is how you say it. SIGGRAPH.
Yeah.
It's June 30th to August 3rd. So somewhere in that range, we're going to hear more about RX Vega. I'm hoping to see more performance benchmarks. I'm hoping to see actual core counts. I'm hoping to see clock speeds. I'm hoping to see price. I'm hoping to see actual launch date. And hopefully we have good availability too. AMD's had problems with that in the past. But what they did show off other than that is they showed off 2 RX Vegas in Crossfire performing really good on Prey in 4K. It looked very pretty. But there was no frame counter. So we don't actually know what kind of frame rate it was getting. And there was another article I read that pointed out that a 1080, not even a 1080 Ti, can push that game at 4K at close to 60 frames per second. So maybe the 2 of these, though, were obviously, maybe they weren't clocked to the full speed, we can hope, and maybe it was running at over 100 frames per second. Give them the benefit of the doubt here, but we'll see. It definitely looked smooth, though, from what I was told. It did not look like it was really, really below. Mitch says they really fumbled the Vega launch. This architecture really needs to knock. Yeah, I totally agree, Mitch. They need to do something amazing. It needs to be really, really, really good. And they either need to hit one of 2 things, or what I'm hoping for is both. One, they need to either fucking blow NVIDIA out of the water with performance, as in like damn close or even better than 1080 Ti performance for less price. And or they need to just have absolutely bonkers price to performance, which is something that people care about a lot, and performance per watt. If they could do that, if I can get 1080 level performance for $200, they fucking captured that. Even if we can't get 1080 Ti and Titan X performance, even if their architecture, they don't have anything out that actually has enough power to do that. If we can get things that are like half the price of NVIDIA stuff. So I'm just, obviously I'm hoping, my hopes are really high here, and I'd like to see an option for kind of both of those things. But I hope that we're waiting for something good, because AMD, man, if they can make a comeback on the Radeon side of things right now too, it'd be so good for the market. It's more important that they made a comeback on CPUs, I think. But,
and as Mitch said, it needs to be a proper actual launch where you can actually, you know, buy the GPU.
Yeah.
Kind of
it's like
important.
I agree with that. Yeah, it needs to be purchasable. It needs to have a full lineup, not 1 or 2 GPUs. I'd like to see like 6 GPUs, like please. And again, please with full stock. Oh my gosh, when some of the like the R9 290s and stuff like that came out, I was trying to buy them and I fucking couldn't, and I ended up buying a 970 instead because they didn't have them in stock.
Yeah, and with something that I will talk about closer to the end of it, some people might have reason to be buying a shit ton of GPUs, especially if this is good at Bitcoin mining.
That's a good point too. Yeah.
Something odd.
Yeah.
So,
and also, as Mitch is saying, the price to performance is where he's personally not convinced. Yeah, I agree with you, Mitch. I'm not convinced. I'm hoping. AMD, although what we all know is they tend to take a smaller profit per unit when they sell things versus Intel and NVIDIA, which, you know, as I said before, I've been okay with NVIDIA doing that for a very long time, even back when AMD was competitive, because they reinvested the money, and that's part of why they're where they are today. It was a better long-term strategy. But yeah, basically, I'm just sitting here hoping that it ends up being something incredible. And I'm hoping for good enough power efficiency for desktop GPUs and laptops, because please, we need competition there, because AMD is completely dead on laptops. 100% no competition on laptop GPUs from AMD right now, unless you're talking APUs. And their APUs CPU architecture portion is so bad, those aren't around anymore. So I was like, fuck. Okay, so let me try and move on a little bit more information on the Vega Frontier Edition, which is their Pro card that's going to be for deep learning and stuff like that, is launching on June 27th. That's official. I'm hoping some of the big YouTubers and stuff and big companies like Exynetek or Linus Tech Tips get a hold of this here and actually run some gaming stuff on it, because that will give us insight on what the gaming performance is going to be like. Of course, no game optimization, no driver optimization, and possibly slower, you know, clock speeds and slower memory speeds and stuff like that. They may not even be able, maybe it'll be locked, but, you know, it'll be just nice to see at least a little brief of, hey, you know, this is what it's capable of, but potentially more, and here's the price that they're charging, which is probably way overpriced because it's a professional rated card. No, there is no price for it yet, though, Mitch. Unfortunately, there's no price for it, which does make me sad. Honestly, I was hoping to get more information. I feel like AMD did really good with Threadripper, other than announcing a price. I would have liked to see a price, but other than that, they did good. Assuming that there's only a 16-core line, maybe there's more, you know, core variances. Maybe there'll be more later. But anyway, Vega was a really disappointing announcement at Computex. The Threadripper hype is very real right now, because they announced things that are actual confirmed specs that are very impressive. But yeah, the Vega stuff is just so sad. And yeah, nothing else new other than it comes out on June 27th.
Yeah.
And so like that basically is just proof that Vega is getting close. I'm guessing what they're doing is they're just waiting on better yields for the architecture before they actually introduce it to consumers. It's pretty common for GPU manufacturers and even CPU manufacturers to release things to the professional market first, because they have worse yields on their silicon platters, and so they can make up the fact that they have to throw away, like literally throw away, a bunch of CPUs that aren't functioning by charging more per chip. Mm-hmm. So I think it's understandable, and they're probably just waiting for it to get down to a price that they're comfortable with. So that might even mean that Vega's already at the point that it could launch. They're just waiting on yields, and I would not be surprised by that at all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ryzen on laptops real quick.
8-core and 6-core laptops, Thank you, Lord. I am so happy. I have been waiting for Intel to do this, and they've been giving me the finger for a very long time. So as many of you know, I even talked about in several live streams with Daniel, several wordcasts, I even talked about the fact that the 8-core Ryzen chips were capable of lower TDPs, slightly lower TDPs than like the 7700K and 7600K i7 and i5 from Intel. And so the fact is, if they're lower TDPs, they should be able to have the same cooling system or even weaker cooling system and still have those desktop CPUs. So Asus actually showed it off. It's the GL702ZC. I'm not sure if any other companies showed off laptops with Ryzen CPUs, but I know
I only saw Asus.
I only saw Asus as well, except some APU stuff. We'll get into that in a moment. But Ryzen 7 1700 desktop chip, 8-core CPU on a fucking laptop. We're finally going to have laptops that actually can be used for, workstation grade stuff. And also, see you later, Mitch. Yes, thank you for joining, Mitch. I'll try and get you on the show sometime. That'd be a really cool thing to do. I'll talk to you about that later. But anyway, yeah, 8-core laptops. So we're actually in 6-core laptops with the Ryzen 5 1600. So we're actually going to be seeing laptops that can do real workstation tasks, real video editing, and that's something that I would really like to see. And personally, whenever I do replace my Sega laptop, which will be a ways down the road, I got a lot of other computers to build first. But whenever I do eventually build this, replace this, I'm going to want something with more cores that's going to help me with my video editing and stuff when I'm on the go. So this is something that I definitely would like to see. Now, another interesting thing is Asus said that they're going to have a Ryzen 3 1200 quad core in there. Those are not officially announced. If I understood the article correctly, it looks like basically Asus just leaked Ryzen 3 officially. No details on it, but yeah, basically means, yeah, it's a thing, and there's going to be quad cores in the Ryzen 3 lineup. It's not just Ryzen 5 that'll have quad cores. That's cool to see too. So I'm really just overall excited to see laptops with more than 4 cores. Mm-hmm. Intel's been fucking us over, like I said, for a very long time on that front.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Okay, here. So we already went over Dim.2. Mobile stuff. So Ryzen is now going to be in the mobile market with APUs with Vega graphics. Now, as we all know, AMD is really heavily pushing APUs, and rightfully so. I think APUs, in the end, for consumer compute, is the way to go because you have such good integration between the GPU and CPU. And the idea behind it, in fact, you guys may have heard of something called HSA, Heterogeneous System Architecture, that AMD talks about when they launched some of their old FX-based, Bulldozer-based APUs, which are actually excavator cores technically. It was the fourth refresh of Bulldozer. They were talking about this HSA foundation, which was basically allowing the CPU and GPU that are on the APU to essentially share the exact same basically cache and actually share the onboard memory as well for the system. And in sharing those things, they're able to transfer data back and forth super quickly. But also the idea, which the very few applications that supported it saw massive performance gains from this, we're able to basically allocate things to the GPU that are more suitable for a GPU workload. Things that would normally sit on the CPU for a couple of reasons. First, they were programmed just to sit on the CPU. Second, there was so much latency between CPU and GPU, it made more sense just to get it over with on the CPU, so to speak. This mitigated that problem and allowed them to have just massive performance increases on the few things that supported it. So anyway, point is, APUs are different from integrated graphics. In case those of you didn't know, integrated graphics from Intel, it's a GPU and CPU on the same die. They're completely separate other than that. So, I mean, and I think, yeah, the GPU does technically use your system RAM as VRAM, but they don't really share it the same way. So anyway, mobile Ryzen APUs with Vega graphics. Not much else was given about it, which makes sense because they're being tight-lipped on Vega right now. But they did say that there will be quad cores with 8 threads on ultra-portable, ultra-thin notebooks. That is super cool to see because we have not seen quad cores on ultrabooks and stuff like that from Intel. Intel is not releasing ultrabook CPUs in the quad core form factor. So that's something that I'd like to see. And so that's kind of AMD's idea. I think they even said there was a quote, they want to crush Intel in that area, which actually makes sense because let's be honest, those U-series CPUs, the performance of them is freaking garbage. And if we can get Vega graphics on an APU with a quad core GPU, we might actually see the ability of some lightweight gaming on ultra portables and stuff like that, which AMD kind of did with their older APUs. I actually had a fairly thin, lightweight, although this was before thin and lights were huge, so it wasn't as common, but a fairly thin and lightweight HP Envy laptop that had a APU in it. I can't remember what GPU was in the APU. I can't even remember. It was the A10 something in its 70. Anyway, point is, it was actually okay to game on. So we could actually see some really thin machines. The only question here is power consumption. Part of the reason that Intel hasn't bumped up to quad cores for the U series Ultrabook processors is because power consumption needs to remain lower. Battery life is the name of the game, and as a business person or as anybody that's going to be using an Ultrabook, basically battery life is the number one thing. And that's one thing I will say. My XPS 13, I don't care that its SSD doesn't perform as good as I like. I don't care that it has a 1080p screen. I don't care about this, that, and this, because the battery life on that thing is like 7-8 fucking hours of actual web browsing usage. That's really, really, really good. That's exactly what I want. Nothing else matters to me. But if they can keep the battery life very similar to Intel, I'd say within 15%, so maybe even 15% lower battery life, which is pretty significant on, talking 10 hours. That is pretty significant.
Yeah.
But if you are getting double the performance or more, then it might be a worthy trade-off depending on what you're doing. If you're going to be doing kind of workstation-ish tasks, on the go, actual work that requires more than just spreadsheeting and web browsing, it'd be really nice to have quad cores with 8 threads. And the other thing that I thought of is CPUs use more as they clock higher and stress more. So if you're trying to do a really hefty workload that pushes, say, an Intel dual core to near 100% work, near 100% load, whereas it would only push this, say Ryzen to like a 40% load, these Ryzen APUs, you might actually see better battery life for that particular task on the Ryzen system simply because it's only running at 40% of its usage, whereas Intel's pushing as hard as it can, if that makes sense.
Now, I feel like, and so if this is actually battery life comparable, we're going to see Intel just come out with a quad core that takes the same percentage hit. I mean, that's really what it's going to come down to.
I think you're right. But I think
there's no way that AMD can hit that number and Intel can't.
No, and I totally agree with you. The point is, if AMD can grab this first from the actual device
but it's only going to take
manufacturers,
as long time as it would take for them to just pop
it's
out
not going to be a
chips in.
lot of time. But the point is, if these are available on the market first, and everybody that wants a quad-core Ultrabook grabs them first.
Yeah, but I mean,
market's
other than tech enthusiasts who also probably wouldn't care about just getting a slightly thicker laptop, I feel like it's not going to be one of those things like when a new game console generation launches and someone has a 4, 5, 6 month advantage and that wins them the generation. It's going to be, oh, cool, I'll pick this up. But 90% of people will just wait until they need a new laptop anyway.
That is a good point. That is okay.
So,
I could agree with you on that.
It's going to just kind of depend on how it actually performs in battery life and what Intel's response is. Because I feel like Intel could just pop one out within a few months if they wanted.
Oh yeah. I would give them 2 months. 2 months is what I would say would be their time frame on that, because I'm sure they already have something that's capable of doing it. It'd just be a matter of manufacturing them and getting them into laptops. It'd be a matter of just shipping them out, saying, "Here's a bunch of new shit, Dell. Go fucking put it in your laptops," So, Intel has been really good as a business when it comes to their pleasing investors.
Yeah.
They've been very good about that. Intel has all these things in their pocket where I am sure they were planning to release 12 cores for like $1,500.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, Threadripper got announced with 16 cores, and Intel was like, well, we'll label a couple more Xeons i9s and clock them up. Because Intel knows that it's based on their Xeon platform, these i9s are. They know this. And so all they had to do was go, well, how many threads or how many PCI Express lanes is it going to have? Okay, cool. Because they didn't confirm anything else about the i9s. And I'm 99% sure that's why they didn't confirm anything else about the i9s. Is they were just like, quick, change the press conference. And then, we're going to go talk about these i9s now that are going to be higher clocked. You just shift things around, and we'll deal with actually making them later, because we'll just take our Xeon chips and find the ones that are binned a little better and overclock them. So that I feel like Intel's really good at that kind of response time, where they saw Threadripper and within a month they were like, all right, well, we got 18 cores now. They could have pulled a 24 core or 26 core from the Xeon lineup out of their ass and done that instead.
That would have cannibalized too much of the...
No, I'm not saying they would have. I'm just saying that they're one-upping AMD. AMD was like 16 core, and Intel was like, oh,
okay,
18 cores sounds good.
Yeah.
You know, like no problem. We'll announce the official specs later, but here 18 cores, 44 PCIe lanes.
Yeah.
No problem. So I mean, Intel is good at responding to that stuff. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Intel just had a quad-core Ultrabook CPU in their back pocket. And honestly, as long as they weren't planning to just hold on to this shit and never release it if they didn't need to, if they had this shit in their back pocket just to fire back at AMD when AMD tries to take
I don't think it's that. I feel like what they were probably doing was just working on it on the back end with no intention on releasing it until efficiency was where they wanted it to be.
That's a good point. Yeah, probably.
And if AMD is willing to sell it with a 15% efficiency hit or like battery life hit, and Intel can come out with, say a 10% battery life hit, well then fuck it, we're doing better.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think, Intel though I think maybe has this already and just hasn't released it because they were waiting for AMD to attempt something because they know they're working on it now.
Yeah,
that's what I'm getting at. Is they might have been ready to release something like this a month ago, but then they're like, well, let's wait a second. Let's hold off on this, and then AMD releases something and they go, boom, ours is just as good or better.
Okay.
And it's kind of them firing back. Mm-hmm. So last bit of AMD news I'm going to go over very quick. They fixed the memory issue on the Ryzen AM4 platform. You can now run memory at 4,000 megahertz and potentially higher, but it looks like 4,000 megahertz, which is really important because that actually helps Ryzen's performance because of the way Infinity Fabric on Ryzen works, the way it basically interconnects. I believe that's the way it connects to PCI Express and all that kind of stuff. I'm not 100% sure. I don't know a lot about Infinity Fabric.
Infinity Fabric is how, you know
how the CPXs connect, isn't it?
Yeah, so the CPUs are structured in sets of cores.
Right. Sets of quad cores. Yeah.
And so Infinity Fabric is how the sets of quad cores interact. And so the better,
that's right.
The higher speed of the Infinity Fabric, which is based off of the RAM's actual core clock, the higher the speed of that, the better the transfer rate is between the quad cores. So anything that uses multiple threads that's reaching from one side to the other would get an increased performance.
Okay, and that makes sense because I was reading a little bit and listening to a little bit more about Infinity Fabric, and I do know that its actual like data transfer rates range anywhere from 100 gigabytes per second to 512 gigabytes per second, but it does depend on memory clock speed and stuff. Now, I think it's really impressive that AMD has been able to build an architecture that is modular. That's kind of what AMD has done here is they go, we can just keep stacking shit as much as we want. And that's the idea behind Infinity Fabric. AMD, if they wanted, albeit it'd probably require a new socket again, it'd be a server-only thing, they could release a 64-core CPU.
Yeah.
They could do it. It's modular. It's the way they're set up, and I don't think Intel's architecture is set up the same way. So it's, right, we already know it's not. Sorry, I shouldn't even say it. I know it's not. I don't know why I said I don't think. So in that case, with AMD's architecture being built to be fully modular, I mean, they can make a 128-core CPU. They don't give a shit.
Yeah, they could just keep stacking it.
Exactly, and that's the whole idea behind the CCXs, and that is going to allow them to, that's what's allowing them to make these 16-core, 32-core chips, and probably with very minimal price increase. Because if you look at an 8-core Ryzen 1800X is going for $450, and you can get the 1700 for $300. Yeah. When you look at that, you double the price of that for a 16-core, you're looking at still under $1,000. Meaning they could charge $1,000 flat, and they're going to wreck all over Intel because of that. And it's simple because they're just going, okay, well, they're playing with little puzzle pieces. They're like, oh, well, we'll just click. All right, now we have a 16-core. Done. The Infinity Fabric connects and they work, so to speak. It's like Minecraft for CPUs.
Yeah.
It's so intelligent.
Something else I wanted to mention with Infinity Fabric, though, it's one of the weird things, too, where it's actually almost more advantageous the lower down you go within Ryzen. Because when you're looking at, let's say you're looking at a 6-core Ryzen chip, you have 2 of the cores, because it's an 8-core chip, but where 2, because of yield or whatever, just weren't activated. So there's 2 disabled.
Right. So it's 2 CCXs, one full functional, one that's not.
Well, not necessarily.
Or it could be
sometimes
one with
be 1 and 1. It can be sometimes where each side. And so if you have that situation, or let's say you have, especially in the 6-core case where you might have 1 on each side disabled. Well,
I'm really
then
mad at you.
depending on which cores are running best for like a 2 or 3 core application, you might see 2 cores on one side and 1 core on another, 2 on each that are running at their top speeds. And so then the Infinity Fabric is more advantageous. When you have something like a full, 8 core where 4 on each side are running top tier, then it might not give you, it'll still give you a lot of benefit because it's interconnecting. But if you're running a quad core application, it might all be running on one side rather than 3 and 1 or 2 and 2.
Right, and I get what you're saying, although I would probably say that the Infinity Fabric's bandwidth is enough that it doesn't matter.
It's been shown to matter.
It's been shown to. Okay, I wasn't sure. I'm mad at you. I said I'm mad at you because you seem to know a little bit more about the Ryzen architecture than me, which pisses me off because I've always been the architecture guy here. So now I have to go stay up all night studying this.
I know more about Infinity Fabric because that really interested me, and I watched a bunch of videos on it.
Okay.
You know more about the rest of it.
Okay, that's a good point. But I need to go read like some PC Pro articles about Infinity Fabric or something. Yeah. But still, the point is it's a modular CPU and it's an incredible idea. And I think AMD has really hit the spot here with just something mind blowing. Yeah, that's what it really is at this point. And being able to see servers that maybe can house, freaking 128 cores in a server with 256 threads. Like, are you fucking kidding me?
Yep. Yeah.
It's insane. Running at like 4 gigahertz.
Yeah.
What? So I'm impressed with what they've been able to do. And AMD has really, they are fighting back so hard. And I just hope Radeon can do the, Radeon Technologies Group can do the same thing. Yeah,
I hope so. Let's talk essentials. I guess this is the last big topic, although it's kind of now merged into a lightning round. So I'll do the home really quick. So essentially, there's a new company called Essential. It is made by someone named Andy Rubin. Now, for those of you that follow Android, you'll know who I'm talking about because he was kind of the guy that created Android.
He's a little bit important. He made a tiny impact on the world.
So he started Android with originally apparently the idea was to make software for digital cameras, and then it merged into a smartphone OS that was designed for like a BlackBerry style phone. And then from there, it transformed when Google bought it into an iPhone competitor for touchscreens, blah, blah, blah. He made Android. He knows what he's doing when it comes to device design because he was on the Android project for quite a long time. And now he started a new company. They've shown off 2 products. I'll go over the home first because it's kind of we know less details about it. It's essentially a Amazon Echo or Google Home competitor. So it's a in-home smart assistant style device. Now this is unique in that it's a round device like the Echo Dot, for example, except it has a built-in circular display.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That makes it look sleek in a home environment.
Yeah, it does. And it can display quite a bit of information, and it can take some of the functionality you'd see off of Amazon's Echo Show and also off of Google's casting functionality to show you things like calendar appointments. And on top of that, for search results, it can show you extra information that you wouldn't normally be able to get off of just a voice.
Right.
So that's pretty cool.
This is just a concept technically right now, right?
Yes.
Do they have any demo products?
Yes. So they have products. Apparently, they're planning on releasing by the end of the summer, although they haven't shown off the actual hardware to us yet.
Okay. So I'm assuming they probably have some prototypes that they don't want to show.
Yeah. Now
they're not close enough to their vision yet.
Yeah. The big thing here is what's called ambient OS. Essentially, I keep saying that. Essential has developed their own OS, and it's going to be fully open source, so you could actually see other devices running this OS, which is really cool. But it is specifically made for this type of product, which is actually pretty new. I mean, sure, we have Alexa and we have Google Assistant, which is
supposed to say Echo. Everybody's Echoes just went off now because you said the name.
Yeah, but see, if I said Echo, then that wouldn't actually fully convey the full list of products, seeing as how Alexa's found on quite a lot of things. If you're watching a tech show, and I've learned this from having it happen to me, you should probably just hit the mute button.
I mean, that's an option, but you see, the thing is, you already triggered all of them before telling them to mute it.
My Echo Dot has not gone off, and it is not on mute. So if mine hasn't gone off, your guys probably shouldn't be.
somebody's out there, they've got like their stereo cranked all the way in their house because they're like trying to run on the treadmill while listening to the stereo downstairs, and their echo upstairs went off and it can't hear them because they can't yell loud enough over everything to tell it no. So somebody's gonna sue us now because they fell off their treadmill trying to turn off their echo.
Don't think you can sue for that. Well, you can sue for it. You can't win. Let's say that.
Okay, that's a good point.
Back to the essential home. So there's some really cool things about this that I really like. So for one, now we don't know what all this will ship with, but the end goal is for this to quote unquote bring order to the endless standards, protocols, and systems throughout the Internet of Things, which has been the biggest problem. I mean, it's really hard for consumers to get into it when you have some things that work with HomeKit for iPhone and some that don't. Some that work with...
So it's an Internet of Things OS, correct?
Pretty much, yes.
It's not just like a voice assistant OS.
No. This is very much an Internet of Things device.
Okay.
So it is designed to fully support pretty much everything. It should have some level of compatibility with Alexa, Siri, and Assistant, along with SmartThings, HomeKit, Nest, Hue, pretty much everything that you can think of, they will build into it. It software-wise essentially has an integrated version of it's their own version. It's not actually if this then that, but their own version of if this then that built in, which I think could be really cool because if this and that has a lot of limitations that a company building their own version of might not have. So you can build out much more in-depth things, which I really, really like.
Nothing. Sorry. Nothing. I just thought of something. Anyway, so I think this is very cool. This is very cool. I like this.
And then one other really big deal for this, and I think that the only thing that's likely to compete with this as far as this specific feature is whatever Siri's or like Apple's like Siri Home Assistant would be.
Right.
But, as much of the processing that can happen as possible will happen locally on the device, not in the cloud. So the idea is you'll keep a bulk of your data. What's that banging?
Sorry, I was tapping my keyboard. My bad. Okay. My bad. Sorry. Anyway, I got distracted for a second.
I noticed. So essentially a lot of the data will be kept on device rather than being sent off to the cloud. So it's a lot better for privacy. And that's especially important for Internet of Things devices. If you can keep that processing for those commands on device and only use the internet when you need to.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's less of a chance of hacking, which is a big potential problem for Internet of Things. We've already
how pissed would you be if somebody turned off your laundry just to piss you off?
Well, no, it's not that.
No, I'm kidding.
I know. But for people that are watching, the big thing, and we've already seen this happen before, is people taking control of Internet of Things devices specifically for the intention of malicious DDoSing. We've seen there was that
botnets is what it's called.
Wasn't it last year or like late last year there was a massive botnet used for a massive DDoS attack that was Internet of Things specific.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the type of thing where this could be a real problem because Internet of Things devices don't get updated in the same way and in general just don't get looked at from a security standpoint the same way because it's not something that you would be putting your personal information on. So if you can have this device handle the connection for you, and what I would like to see is any devices that connect to this hub not connect to the internet themselves at all. If they can make it so that this is the internet connectivity for your devices, so like let's say
that makes security so much easier. It's its own. It becomes the IoT
exactly. Yeah, and then they could have an app on your phone for remote control that would connect specifically to this, and the connection would be encrypted, and so they could handle the security for you from every aspect.
I really like this, actually. I like this. The other big problem, by the way, with IoT security issues isn't just like botnets and stuff, and obviously being able to listen to people's private conversations, which is a little bit creepy, but just a little bit. But also, it makes it easier to get into networks.
Yeah.
If you can get into the IoT device, you're past the firewall on the Wi-Fi network already. Now you can easily attack everything else without a firewall being in the way. So that's honestly probably, I just twisted my glasses, the biggest issue with IoT devices being unsecure, in my opinion, is, you know, the actual things that could affect the person that purchases the IoT device. You know, like DDoS attacks and stuff aren't going to, like, if I buy an Echo and my Echo is DDoSing, you know, frickin', let's say Apple or something, for whatever reason, some mass DDoS attack, it's like I don't really know, so it doesn't affect me purchasing.
I mean, you don't know that it was that, but I mean, like if we look at the DDoS attack that happened last year, and I think it was October. Yeah, it was October 21st. I mean, you're looking at Twitter, Pinterest, Reddit, GitHub, Etsy, Tumblr, Spotify, PayPal, Verizon, Comcast, PlayStation. All of those were brought down by one DDoS attack.
This is true, right? What I'm getting at though is it doesn't affect me like sitting in the home with my device. Whereas
unless you're trying to use the internet.
Yeah, I get that.
So it doesn't affect that device.
That's the point I'm making.
But it's a bigger issue than that as far as scale goes, because it could be, instead of it affecting one thing, your device, it affects 20 services that you use.
Right, and I totally understand that. The point I'm getting at is just I personally would be more concerned about an Echo sitting in my room that is allowing WannaCry to, I know that's Windows based, but I'm making this as an example.
No. The only person listening to this conversation besides our viewers is the NSA. Don't worry.
I don't care if the NSA listens to me. Listen to me all I fucking want.
Yeah.
I'll talk nasty. How about that?
They are probably listening right now.
They're recording it. They're not listening. I don't prefer.
No. Someone's actually someone at the NSA is like, oh, this is a pretty good podcast. I think I'll just keep listening to this guy's microphone.
Right. Well, no. The thing I like that's funny actually is that people are always like, the NSA is always listening. And I'm like, so did like the U.S. hire 300 million outside people to monitor the 300 million people here in the U.S. 24/7?
No, it's called machine learning. And
yeah. It's audio. Recording it, it's machine, it's stuff like that. Yeah, right. But the deep learning. The point I'm getting at though is they can record all the shit I want. It's like whatever. I'm not concerned about it. I'm not going to go out and do something wrong. I still don't prefer my privacy being invaded. Like I totally am in support of fuck the NSA.
Yeah.
The point I'm getting at is I don't care.
Yeah. But I mean, you should, because then it becomes, okay, well, what if someone decides they want to target someone who's politically against them?
Right. So no, I'm when I say I do actually care about the issue, I'm just saying I don't take things to avoid being listened to. I would rather fight to just make them stop it all.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, myself, I'm just kind of all right, fucking listen to me. I don't care.
Yeah. Okay, the other big essential product, and this actually has me even more excited than the essential.
It's an essential product.
Yeah, it's an essential phone. That's literally the name. It's the essential phone. I think the model is the PH-1. This is a $700 top of the line, absolutely beautiful phone. So for those of you who have seen the LG G6 or the Galaxy S8, where they're attempting to do edge-to-edge from side to side. Well, this does that, but then it also takes something that we've seen from a few smaller companies where they'll do the top bezel will be all the way up to the edge, with one exception. Normally on those phones where you have the left, right, and top edge bezel-less, you have the camera on the bottom, which can cause all sorts of weird things.
We all know how cameras on the bottom worked out.
Yeah. So what they're doing is they just said, fuck it, let's put it on the top anyway. So on the top of the screen, you have a little tiny divot, and the screen just kind of wraps around the camera. Now,
genius.
Yeah, especially since it's running pretty much stock Android, and Android doesn't really use the top of that, that top section of the phone in its status bar. Most of the time, the apps don't, the icons on the status bar don't show up there. Because it's dead in the center.
Are you sure?
Yeah, it's dead in the center.
I mean, my center is showing icons.
Yeah, I mean, they can, well, for one,
they can move it around. I'm just
not always. And they can tweak it, and they can do things that I think everyone should do. Like, why the fuck do most phones have an NFC on icon when NFC doesn't use a significant amount of battery life? Or at least why can't I turn off the NFC icon?
Right, exactly.
So there's a lot of things they could do to work around that. But all in all, it's just a gorgeous phone. On top of that, it has some absolutely fantastic specs. It's running a Snapdragon 835, 4 gigs of RAM, 128 gigs of storage, USB-C. It's got 2 rear cameras. Now, this is much more similar to the Huawei P10 rather than something like the iPhone. So instead of using one for depth and one for extra zoom, and
this
one
is
for
the better
regular,
way to do it too.
Yeah, it uses one for monochrome and one for color. The monochrome one is specifically better at sensing low light, and so what they do is they combine the images to give you a much, much better low light, full colored image. It also the front and back camera are capable of 4K video. The front or the back camera is 13 megapixels. The front is 8. Now I don't think it's actually 8 exactly, or if it is, it's not 8 in the standard like 4:3 ratio that most cameras are
at. Yeah.
Because it's 4K. And a straight 8 megapixel 4:3 camera can't actually do 4K video because part of the resolution would not be high enough. It's a little weird. All in all, though, I think it's just a slightly different configuration of 8 megapixels. It's most likely just 16:9, but still enough pixels to be considered 8.
Right. Which no, that makes sense. 8 is 8 million. I mean, if it's 8,999,999, it's still technically 8 megapixels. So.
Yeah, although they've had like I think the first few 4K cameras on phones were like 8.3 or 8.4 megapixels.
Right, but just saying 8 makes it simpler. Like they can round down. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, and I like this better. So
yeah. So screen resolution is also a little weird. So it's 2560 by 1312.
A little odd, but it's okay because of the edge. Edge-to-edge display. It kind of makes sense.
And for reference on physical size, it's sitting somewhere between the Galaxy S7, not the S7 Edge, the larger one, but the regular S7, and then the HTC U11. So it's actually a fairly small phone.
Right, but it has a big screen. I don't even know if you mentioned the screen size, 5.7 inches.
Yeah, 5.7.
And is there a smaller version of it, or is it just that?
It's just just one model. Okay. It has a 30,040 milliamp hour battery. And it uses a 27 watt charger, which is nearing the level of OnePlus's Dash charger,
which is the fastest out there right now. Correct?
Yeah. Yes. Unfortunately, they went courageous, and it does not have a headphone jack. Now that being said,
they include a dongle at least.
Yes, it includes a dongle. It also uses USB-C, so in the future when USB-C headphones start coming out more and more, you'll actually be able to use it with other products, unlike the Lightning headphones that you can't even use on Apple's own laptops. So there's that.
Yeah, so it works.
And then on top of that, it has a very unique connector. So it's actually, I wouldn't call it very unique. It's very similar to what Motorola uses on their modular smartphone, except it's closer to the top. And for one, there have been rumors that there might be audio products that could go along with this. So that might be something we see as like an alternate to the headphone jack. I don't know exactly. I'm assuming it would just be a speaker, not actually headphones, but I don't know.
Right.
But the big deal here is that we're looking at things like they have I think it's actually the world's smallest 360-degree camera as just a little attachment for the phone. It like essentially clips over the top, connects to the magnetic pins on the back, and
good to go.
It's a full 360-degree camera. And what's cool is that not just is it a nice little 360-degree camera, it
actually looks pretty nice too, to be honest.
Yeah. It looks fantastic. But while normally the 360-degree camera is $200, if you're pre-ordering the Essential phone, you can get it for only $50 extra.
Which is worth at that point.
Yeah.
You should just do it. You should just fucking do it at that point. And I mean, I'm assuming if you are doing that, the profit between the two pays for both and makes, it's just, yeah, you should do that.
Also, what's really nice too about this dual camera system, no camera bump.
I know. I find it hilarious that they could actually do that right. Whereas, Samsung's like, gotta be a millimeter thinner, camera bump time. It's like, come on.
Yeah.
Like most of the reviewers and stuff say, even with my V20 here, I would rather, it's fairly thick phone, but I would rather have it be that little bit thicker and have another like 400 milliamp hours of battery.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact is, most people are like, well, you can't increase the battery capacity by that much thickness wise, which isn't technically 100% correct. You can. But also part of the problem with it is you could move circuit boards around that way. So if they can make it just a little bit thicker, they can move some boards that are maybe in the way of the battery and stack them on top of other boards on the side, and then make it even more space for the battery.
Yeah.
So that's something that people need to keep in mind. Or they can stack things under the battery and expand the battery in different directions. So I appreciate that they're doing this, and I think a 3,000 milliamp hour battery is pretty good for that size of a phone. We'll see how the battery life is, but I imagine since it's not a heavily modified version of Android, it should be great.
Mm-hmm. And it's not even full 1440p resolution technically, so it's actually a little bit less than normal.
Yeah, this is true.
I'm gonna go into the lightning round stuff so that we can get this all over with.
We stole that from NCIX. We're sorry.
Yeah. Well, I just didn't know a better name. I was in a hurry.
That's fine. Well, if they yell at us, we'll say sorry and won't use it again.
Sure. So we have, first off, ASRock. So they showed off X299 and some AM4 mini ITX motherboards. Cool. The more interesting motherboard, in my opinion, is the H110 Pro BTC Plus. Now, when I was talking about Bitcoin miners wanting to buy lots and lots of graphics cards, this is what the fuck I was talking about. So this motherboard has support for 13 graphics cards.
Yeah.
It's got 13 PCI slots. You would use ribbon cables to essentially put the graphics cards onto like a rack. If you've ever seen Bitcoin mining setups that use lots of GPUs, this is pretty common, where you use cables to essentially spread them out. But this has a ridiculous amount of support.
I know, it's awesome. It's awesome. Yeah. Man,
it's all about mining Bitcoins. You use a low-end CPU, a high.
What the fuck is up with ASRock lately?
Dude, they just do everything. That's I
don't understand. Like, Asus used to be the innovator, and I still feel like they're pushing the envelope when it comes to the innovation on a regular motherboard. Mm-hmm. And in fact, they made some of the best ITX motherboards back in like the Z97 days. But now all of a sudden, ASRock's like, we're just gonna make every motherboard we can possibly think of.
Yep.
Like, they even made that one motherboard that had it was smaller than ITX. It had no PCI Express slots. It was just a CPU socket.
Yeah.
And now they have a dedicated Bitcoin mining fucking board. Yep. Jeez.
Yeah. Well, it's actually not their first one. It's just their best one so far.
Oh my god.
So also really quick with their ITX boards, I really love, so they have an X370 gaming ITX. It's on the same source article, by the way, for you, if you just scroll down.
Yeah, I am looking at it.
It's got built-in AC Wi-Fi, and it just looks like a very, very, high quality for the price board it's got.
For AM4 is awesome. Ryzen ITX, man. I mean, now 8-core ITX doesn't require some weird fucking configuration that ASRock had to do with the X99 stuff. Remember that? Where they had the DIMM slots all weird, so most coolers wouldn't actually fit it. You had to get custom plates and stuff like that and custom adapters if you wanted to water cool it. It even came with a cooler with the motherboard because most coolers didn't have the narrow ILM configuration for it. So anyway, point is, it's very nice because now we actually have 8 cores on a regular ITX board because the socket isn't enormous.
Yeah. So real quick, also from ASRock, the last thing, they announced a new wireless router. Now the reason I'm talking about it, because normally I just wouldn't care. It's just another wireless router.
The X10 router. Yes.
So this is an Internet of Things specified or specific router. So essentially, what this does is, for one, it's a wireless router that has a quad-core AC31 or 1300. It combines essentially a few universal Internet of Things hubs, though. So what we're looking at, and the biggest deal, is built-in Zigbee wireless for control, automation, scheduling, blah, blah, blah. Zigbee is the standard that most things run off of. So, for example, IKEA's smart lighting technically runs off of the Zigbee standard. So you could connect the IKEA lights to this. You don't need to use Hue. You don't need to use anything else. You could connect it to this router.
And it becomes the hub. Does it replace the IoT hubs that would normally come with those devices?
For anything that supports Zigbee, yes, you can connect them to this.
Right. And then other things just connect to it like a normal Wi-Fi router. Now, can it function as a normal Wi-Fi router too?
Yes. Okay. But you wouldn't want to spend the amount of money on this unless you were planning on using Internet of Things.
Right. I mean, it's an expensive Wi-Fi router that is Internet of Things added on it. It's not just Internet of Things is what I was getting at. It wasn't like, I mean, of course you can connect other things to it.
It is a wireless router
that
has a Zigbee hub built in.
Right. I guess what I was getting at, because obviously it wasn't going to be a Wi-Fi router that only could connect to Zigbee devices. What I was getting at was just that it wasn't like a really shitty Wi-Fi router.
No. It's full AC support and everything.
Right. And that's what I was questioning, is I didn't see a price on here at first, so I wasn't sure if it was maybe like a $30 router that was specifically for that. So... No, which makes sense. It's kind of weird that it only has 2 antennas, though, for being such a high-end router.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like it's not
designed
to be a
range
high-end gaming laptop. And IoT devices send less info, so they can get a little bit more range off of less frequency.
Yeah, they're pretty tall antennas too, actually, which I think, from what I know, actually helps more than more.
Better antennas matter more than lots of antennas.
Right, exactly.
If you have a shit ton of really good antennas, that's best.
Right. Well, also more antennas really, in my eyes, expands the range in a more even pattern.
Yeah.
Versus better antennas just expand the range. So, which
And
in this
depending
case
on the
kind of
IoT
matters more.
device, some Internet of Things devices have been working on the ability to essentially daisy chain themselves. So as long as one is within range and another is within range of that one device, you can keep connecting them.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
So,
okay, very cool, very cool.
So let's go on next to Asus real quick. So they showed off some ROG X299 motherboards. They showed off a 24-inch all-in-one that's using a quad-core Kaby Lake and a GTX 1050. So just like it's a all-in-one that could play some basic games at a little bit better settings than
a cool thing, basically. Yeah.
Colorful decided to announce some, let's call them interesting, graphics cards. So we have the Neptune, which is a pretty cool one. It's a built-in all-in-one liquid cooling graphics card. So that's really nice. But then the more odd ones are the Kuden and, more importantly, the customization. So both of these cards are 3-slot cards that have a 4th slot taken up for liquid cooling the backplate. Keep in mind, the main GPU is still cooled by fans. It's just the backplate that's liquid cooled. Now, I don't personally know how much that would make a difference. Who knows? Maybe they figured out some way to, maybe they have something like the fans push the heat onto a plate that pulls the heat onto the backplate or something. They might be doing something odd like that.
We'll have to see when reviews come out.
Yes,
exactly. That's if it's not that, then it's just like the water cooled power supply. It's like whatever.
Yeah, it's just for show.
Yeah. Which, do we have the water cooled power supply in here? If not, we should talk about it soon.
No, because that's not even a new announcement.
Oh, that's right. That wasn't copy text. Never mind. Okay, continue.
And then so then the Kuden, which looks like a normal graphics card, and then there's the customization, which is just this really odd looking graphics card. It's essentially like if you had like a really angry mask and put it on a camouflage background. That's like the best I could tell.
It's really gross.
Yes. It looks like your graphics card is straight up mad at you and also an alien. That is the best way I can describe it.
Yeah. That's actually how I would probably describe it as well.
And then speaking of other odd graphics cards, so MSI has a GTX 1080 Ti Lightning Z. This is a triple slot graphics card that also, for some reason, has 3 8-pin power connectors. Why? That's my question. Why?
Like, who knows? Yeah. Why?
Yeah.
I don't.
Seeing as how, like, you may be thinking, maybe for overclocking or whatnot. If the Kingpin doesn't need 3 8-pin power connectors, this doesn't.
Well, you know why the Kingpin doesn't need 3, right? As far as I know, all Pascal GPUs are voltage locked.
Yeah.
After a certain, they're not voltage locked, sorry, they're voltage limited. After a certain voltage, they're voltage locked. You can't push them any higher. And who knows why NVIDIA did that? Maybe there's some weird reason, but it's kind of weird. I hate it when companies lock anything. Let me fuck up my hardware if I want to, please. But anyway, yeah, so it's just kind of like, it's kind of weird. I don't understand why they're like, here's more power, and it's like,
every single post and article I've seen about it has said, maybe the idea was behind increased clock speeds, but it wouldn't make sense. So nobody has been able to figure it out.
Maybe. I don't know. So, it's weird. It's very odd indeed.
Yeah. And then AData has a bunch of announcements. The important ones that I saw were, for one, they have a PCI 3 X4 NVMe SSD that goes up to 4 terabytes, which is pretty cool. They announced new A2 SD cards that support, I think it's called V90, for essentially 90 megabit video, which is really awesome. They announced some external SSDs that have IP68 dust and water resistance. So if you want an SSD that you can be sure isn't going to be screwed if you're, if you get it wet.
Right, and I think that's useful. I actually like that.
Yeah. Especially for people that do videos outdoor and stuff, and they have a laptop with them and blah, 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 blah. I like it all around.
Yeah.
And then in partnership, and this was actually apparently announced at Intel's event recently about VR, but was kind of skipped over, where essentially there is a wireless accessory for the HTC Vive. Now, this isn't the first one we've seen, but it's probably the best one we've seen. So what this does is it takes advantage of one of the features of 802.11 AD, which is the 60 gigahertz band, which is pretty much unused. So it allows
Right.
for, and it still will for quite a while because it's going to take a long time for that to get saturated. It would support under 7 or about 7 millisecond latency, which is enough for VR, because VR you need, I think it's under 18 before people start, or if you go over that, people start getting sick. So 7 milliseconds of latency combined with just the normal processing, but that's not enough to bring it over 18. 7 is good. 7 is what's needed. It's fantastic.
Right.
So,
right.
And I believe that this accessory will be smaller and therefore more manageable than the previous accessory, which came out of some Chinese company I don't even remember the name of. The one thing that I'm wondering is, and this is going to be the big question until we see an actual HTC Vive 2, battery life.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Yeah, it's probably going to be somewhat atrocious, is my guess.
Yeah. Personally, I would rather see them come out with an integrated adapter for Thunderbolt 3 processing for a single cable that's very, very light and small and just easy to get out of the way. Because while I do love the idea of wireless VR, I think that, you know, maybe if they had, because like we've seen this before where we've seen like laptop backpacks specifically for VR, or Linus's ghetto rigged solution for having like multiple batteries and like 100 different things in a backpack in order to create a one cable solution. Well, what if we had a slim backpack, or even better yet, the I forgot the name of it, the thing that you wear that adds vibration motors or rumble all over.
I can't even remember what it's called either. It's something pack.
Yeah, but you know what I'm talking about. So essentially, what if we had like some kind of backpack or something that had a battery and it had this wireless transmitter in it, but it just had a single cable going to that box. So you still had the advantage of not having to trip over cables. You had something that was able to weight distribute and allow for a much larger battery. I think that for me would be much more interesting than just a fully integrated solution, at least until the time when they have it directly integrated into the headset and can therefore probably do a little bit more with the battery and weight distribution.
Right. Okay.
I think that would be cool. We'll see. We don't know exactly what all will come from this adapter. Maybe someone will be able to just buy it and mod their own solution of what I want. But I think that some kind of combination of this and Thunderbolt would be better than just this or just Thunderbolt.
Right.
Especially since this is an Intel product.
Yeah.
So
it's cool. It's cool.
Yeah. That is, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's lots of other announcements that have been happening, but that's pretty much it from us, I think. We can do there's a lot of other smaller stuff that we can just fit in next week.
Okay.
So,
So I mean, Covfefe.
Yeah, Covfefe. The biggest meme of the day. I think I might buy a Covfefe 2020 shirt.
Oh my gosh, is that a thing now?
Yes, it is.
I hate you.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, thank you everybody for watching. I guess that's pretty much it. I do very much so appreciate everybody that's been watching on the channel and joining in for these. Normally we don't go this late, but thank you for anybody that has stuck around the entire time. You know, normally we're done at about 11 Pacific time. That is, that's 11:30 right now. So anyway, I guess we will talk to you guys later. But thank you for watching, and just be on the lookout for some news articles, because both him and I and a few other people should start writing news articles like tomorrow or something.
Yeah.
So be on the lookout for that. See you guys later.